over 5,000 high-skilled jobs in my constituency through defence, maritime and aerospace. She will understand that last week Boeing concluded their deal to become the successor owner of Shorts Brothers. And can I ask her to confirm that this government will continue to support the advanced manufacturing in my constituency, whether it be with Boeing, Airbus, Thales or Harland Wolff?
Yes, I absolutely reaffirm that commitment. He will know that we are increasing our defence spending, that alongside the work that we're doing in our department. I believe that the defence sector is absolutely critical for jobs, but also for backing that research and development that will lead to further demand and further innovation. And I really hope that next year I may be able to come and visit Northern Ireland. And I'd very much like to see what is happening in his constituency.
John Baxter.
Number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Online content depicting or promoting animal torture is horrific, and let me be clear, it is unacceptable. Under the Online Safety Act, animal cruelty is a priority offence which needs proactive steps from platforms against it. We will keep the pressure on to enforce that.
John Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this year, 2 teenagers were prosecuted for the torture and killing of kittens in a public park. A BBC investigation since uncovered disturbing international network sharing videos of extreme cruelty to cats and kittens with users here in the UK, and those prosecuted found to be in possession of that material. Online animal abuse is not a harmless niche. It is a recognised warning sign for escalating violence, including serious crimes against women and girls. I am pleased the Prime Minister's Christmas card promotes kindness towards animals. Yes. So can my honourable friend outline what further work his department is doing to ensure that we address harmful content?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I first pay tribute to my honourable friend and indeed to her cats, Clement Catley and Mo Mullen, for being right at the vanguard of campaigning on this very serious issue. Animal cruelty is a priority offence in the law, as I mentioned. Ofcom must enforce it. Platforms must act on it. This government will keep the pressure on, as we have done in our engagements with the platforms, to make sure our cats, our animals, are safe from cruelty.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. May I ask the Minister how the Government can do more to ensure proactive detection of this vile material, such as using AI tools and human moderators with specialist training in animal cruelty, so that such content is swiftly identified and removed, and robust measures are put in place to prevent it from reappearing online?
Minister.
Well, can I thank the honourable member for a very apt question on this theme. As I mentioned, animal cruelty is a priority offence under the law. Platforms must take proactive steps, including to assess risk before it obtains and to remove content where it clearly falls foul of the law. The government will keep making sure that enforcement of that through the regulator and via platforms continues at pace.
Question 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Online harassment has no place in our society. Under the Online Safety Act, platforms must take steps to remove illegal content. These duties apply to abuse, to harassment, to threats and hate crimes, to disinformation and misinformation that amounts to illegal content. What's more, this government has already written to Ofcom to accelerate the final phase of implementation of the Online Safety Act. We will continue to make sure that we're empowering users against harassment.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The family of my constituent, Jay Slater, who tragically lost his life last summer, have been subject to the most horrendous harassment and misinformation online whilst grieving their son. Sadly, this does not appear to be an isolated case, and there is evidence of the same content creators targeting multiple victims through tragedy trolling. Will the Minister agree to meet with victims to explore how we can tackle this horrific abuse and give families the space they should have to grieve in peace?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend and indeed pay tribute to Debbie, the mother of Jay Slater, who has had to deal not just with the tragedy of her son's death, but all the subsequent harassment that she and family and friends have experienced. After I met my honourable friend and Debbie, I raised this with platforms. I know the Secretary of State is meeting bereaved families in the new year as well. I'd be very keen on continuing our engagement to make sure that we are supporting victims and working hard to ensure that no other bereaved families face what Debbie and Jay's family have had to.
Ebermella.
Harassment amplifies real-world violence. In West Dorset, 14-year-old Isabella was brutally attacked, but the lasting trauma came from the assault being deliberately filmed circulated online and in group chats in schools across the local area, designed deliberately to humiliate her and led to her being further harassed online and in person. So what steps will the Minister take to ensure that online safety measures properly address the sharing of real-world violent content that re-traumatises victims and leads to further harassment?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the honourable member for raising a very important point. Look, the Online Safety Act already focuses on areas of illegal content, and in particular to keep young people safe under the child safety duties. If there are particular instances that the honourable member wishes to write to me on, I'd be very happy to raise them, notwithstanding the fact that Ofcom continues to be the regulator. We're keeping the pressure on both Ofcom and platforms to act robustly.
The Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I join colleagues in wishing yourself and everyone a Merry Christmas, and my colleague Vicky, the member for Dorset, a happy birthday as well. Alongside online harassment, online fraud is also on the rise. Now, nobody wants a broken heart for Christmas, but online romance fraud is not only ruining lives, but also emptying bank accounts. And Liberal Democrat analysis has showed that romance fraud has more than tripled in the last decade, but the government's fraud strategy has been delayed, and Labour's proposals in opposition, which looked at ensuring that there was joint financial responsibility to victims for social media giants, has now vanished. So will the Minister agree with me that those online social media giants must do more to tackle these scams, and agree with Liberal Democrat calls that they should be financially responsible for those fraud that take place on their platforms? Thanks.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the honourable member for raising that point. Of course, in the spirit of Christmas, Mr. Speaker, whilst love might be in the air in this festive moment, we want to make sure it's financially responsible. And so in that spirit, I will continue to engage with both the regulator and platforms to ensure the existing provisions of the Online Safety Act are robustly enforced when it comes to online fraud and scams, which so many of us experience both directly and indirectly through our constituents.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by congratulating the honourable gentleman on his fantastic event in Parliament last week on this subject. I'm delighted that Queen's University Belfast is benefiting from £5 million in funding for this programme, part of a £13 million wider package from this government to make UK supply chains more resilient. The government is investing a record £86 billion over this spending review period, the largest ever investment in research and development. And ministers regularly discuss a range of issues with Cabinet colleagues to ensure that these programmes align with wider government priorities on economic resilience and innovation.
I'm the MP for North Antrim. We hosted Antrim and Newton Abbey councils for their first Westminster Economic Investment Showcase. Can I ask the Minister, how does the government expect that UKRI funded supply chain research will actually align then with city deal investments such as the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Centre, AMEC, in my constituency of South Antrim?
Mr. Speaker, I think what the honourable gentleman acknowledges in his question is the amount of funding that's going into the area of which he represents and the wider Northern Ireland communities as well. UKRI plays a key role, of course, in strengthening supply chains, supporting regional innovation hubs and aligning research with local economic development goals. This government's funding rounds highlight partnership opportunities, including with the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Centre that he mentions, where projects can complement these facilities, boosting regional innovation and productivity. And this builds on initiatives like the Local Innovation Partnership funding, which empowers local leaders to target research and development investment and unleash the full potential of innovation in his region and the wider Northern Ireland region.
MG Mora, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. UKRI will this afternoon publish its detailed funding allocations for programmes such as reimagining supply chains. Does the Minister agree with the OBR that the AI bubble bursting presents a significant downside risk to the UK economy? And what steps is his department and UKRI taking to protect its investment in innovative companies who will undoubtedly be affected by an AI market correction?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for her question. Of course, technological advancements in AI is going to change the way that government works, it's going to change the way that all of us works. But the key thing about the publication of UKRI's document this afternoon is that it's implementing a record £86 billion over the spending review period, the largest ever investments in research and development, and we have to trust them and trust this government, put that money into the places that's going to benefit the country most, and that means more jobs in more communities all over the country.
This government is determined to ensure young people can seize the opportunities AI brings. That's why we're giving 1 million secondary school pupils skills in tech and AI as part of our Tech First Skills programme. It's why we're replacing the currently overly narrow computer science GCSE and in exploring a new qualification in data science and AI for 16 to 18-year-olds. So we tear down the barriers to success and give young people the chances and choices they deserve to get the jobs of the future.
Tony Ball.
I thank the Minister for her answer. Research commissioned by DCIT estimates that by 2035, approximately 10 million UK workers will be in jobs where AI will be part of their responsibilities. PwC estimates that 18% of existing UK jobs face a high probability of automation by 2035. So what steps is the government taking to ensure that young people in my constituency are well prepared for AI being integrated into their daily working lives so we can minimise those chances of unemployment in the future?
I think the honourable gentleman has hit on one of the biggest challenges and opportunities we face as a country, which is how AI is going to transform how we live, earn and learn. So we must prepare not only our young people, but the entire workforce for the changes AI inevitably brings. That's why, alongside the changes I've already outlined for young people, we will upskill 7.5 million workers in AI skills over the course of the next 5 years. So people in every part of our country and all walks of life can shape their own future, not just be shaped by it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Science and technology skills are vital if we are to fully realise the economic and social opportunities available to us. And I'm sure the Secretary of State would agree that science centres are a vital part of that ecosystem in engaging and enthusing young people in STEM learning. Does the Secretary of State agree that the Government's funding of science centres has to date, as described by the sector, been piecemeal, and will the Secretary of State take action in support of the science centres for our future campaign and get science centres into sustainable and predictable funding arrangements?
I don't agree that this government's approach to supporting STEM has been piecemeal. As I said, we have announced the biggest ever investment into research and development of any government ever, and as part of that, alongside supporting curiosity-led research, we are for the first time directing taxpayers' money towards key government priorities and key British strengths, including in STEM courses. I want to make sure everyone in this country has those opportunities, but I'm more than happy to discuss with the honourable gentleman what more he thinks we could be doing.
Number 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, DCIT and Cabinet Office Ministers are working... with permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer this with question number 12. DCIT and Cabinet Office Ministers are working closely to deliver the new digital ID scheme. The scheme will be inclusive, secure and effective. It will give the public more control over their data than they have now, and it will make public services easier to access. A major inclusion programme backed by £11.7 million will support those at risk of digital exclusion, ensuring the system is accessible and secure for all as we modernise our public services.
Mr. Griffith.
And a very happy Christmas to you. More than 5,300 of my constituents have signed a petition opposing digital ID, alongside nearly 3 million people nationally. In my own local survey, 2/3 opposed it outright. Digital ID did not appear anywhere in Labour's manifesto. The party opposite has no mandate for it and no consent from the public. So when will the Minister explain to the House on what democratic basis the government believes it is entitled to enact its nationwide digital ID?
Mr. Speaker, modernising government was at the heart of our manifesto, and the government is proposing this national digital ID scheme to modernise our public services, improve security and streamline right-to-work checks. And I would say, since we introduced the digital veterans card, it's been downloaded 11,000 times. There's 260,000 people already downloaded the gov.uk app, and 13.2 million people have started to use one login as part of the gov.uk service. In the new year, a public consultation will be launched alongside wider engagement that has already begun with expert organisations and wider stakeholders. A major digital inclusion programme that I've already read out will also be rolled out alongside that.
Maria Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The parliamentary petition against digital ID has been signed by constituency. It's the 4th most signed petition in history. Why does the Minister think it is so unpopular?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's up to the Petitions Committee to schedule those debates, and I'm sure they will schedule that debate in Westminster Hall in due course. But I can only reiterate the Government is proposing this national ID scheme to modernise public services, improve security, streamline right-to-work checks and give the public control over their data. I'm not quite so sure why the Honourable Lady objects to the Government modernising. We have an analogue government with a digital population, and we live in a new world where the economy is modernising and digitising all the time, and government has to catch up.
Mr. Speaker,
I didn't realise you'd changed your name to Gareth Snell. I know he's due to the desk, but I've got to take 2 from each side to get the political balance. Gareth Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when the Minister is rolling out digital ID, will he give serious thought to engaging organisations like the CAB and the Public Libraries Network to help people with their applications so that those that need the ID can get the help at the point of application?
Mr. Speaker, one of the aspects of digital ID that is under-debated in this House is the fact that those that are furthest away from digital inclusion, those are geographically and economically furthest away, will benefit the most from this. And that's why we're investing millions of pounds into the Digital Inclusion Programme, which has just announced 80 projects which will do that, of course, including many in the Honourable Gentleman's own constituency. We have to make sure that the entirety of the public, wherever they are in the country, in whichever economic situation they are in, benefit from digital government and benefit from these better public services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Digital IDs have the potential to make life of my constituent Harlow much easier. However, there are constituents of my constituent Harlow who are concerned about data security. So what reassurance can this Minister give that their data will be safe with this new system?
The data will be safe, it will be a fragmented system, and it will have the highest possible data security standards attached.
Shadow Minister Lincoln John, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night in the Strangers Bar, I bumped into a very influential Labour backbencher who told me with great authority that digital ID simply isn't going to happen. This is good news, of course, because it's going to cost 1.8 billion quid we haven't got, and it's deeply unpopular in the country. So why doesn't the Secretary of State give us all an early Christmas present and simply announce that she's ditching the policy today?
Mr. Speaker, I can merely give the Christmas advice to the Honourable Gentleman not to drink in Strangers' Bar and listen to people that are in there.
We come to topical Zoe Franklin.
One, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
If I may briefly, Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to giving women and girls from all walks of life the chances they need to get the jobs and opportunities of the future. Last week I met British women tech founders in San Francisco, and this week we held the first meeting of our new Women in Tech Task Force to give opportunities to women, to grow our economy and build a better future for Britain.
Zoe Franklin.
Molly Rose Foundation's latest report makes clear bereaved families are deeply concerned that Ofcom has relied on voluntary measures such as geo-blocking Molly Rose Foundation's latest report makes it clear that bereaved families are deeply concerned that Ofcom has relied on voluntary measures such as geo-blocking to deal with pro-suicide forums. Can the Secretary of State explain what steps her government is taking to ensure Ofcom moves beyond voluntary compliance and uses its full Online Safety Act powers to require removal or blocking of suicide-promoting content?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. I think this is a serious issue. We need to make swifter and stronger progress on this. I regularly meet with Ofcom and their Chief Executive. Indeed, I met with them yesterday. And I want to make sure we don't have the delays and we have the stronger action. And this is a point I will be bringing up in future.
Mr. Speaker, the space sector is critical in enabling our security, our ability to counter Russia and defend Europe. Can the Secretary of State explain how she is working with the new National Armaments Director and the MOD to develop a more cohesive approach to the space industry that delivers national security and economic growth?
Thank you for the question, Mr Speaker. Space is fundamental to many civil and defence requirements. It's vital that we collaborate closely across government and with our allies. At the European Space Agency Council of Ministers just last month, we committed £1.7 billion of funding focused on just that, growth and national security.
Julie Lopez, Shadow Secretary.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Ministers are making very big claims about the pharmaceuticals deal with America to make up for the billions lost in life sciences investment under Labour. But life sciences firms are telling me, unless the government reveals what's actually in this deal, those claims are completely hollow. So can the Secretary of State reveal, because she couldn't tell us 2 weeks ago, how much is this deal costing the NHS, and when will she publish the full legal text so that we know the details of what the most favoured nation mitigations actually are?
Secretary of State.
I may have to offer the Honourable Lady a mince pie because she's talking baubles. This pharmaceutical deal will deliver faster access to new medicines for NHS patients, and it will deliver the security and stability that our world-leading pharmaceutical sector needs, including 0% tariffs on their exports to America for 3 years. We are also updating the NICE guidelines for the first time in 20 years, a significant deal that the ABPI has welcomed. It's a pity the Honourable Lady continues to act like Scrooge.
Julia Lopez.
If we're making Christmas jokes, I think this deal is all tinsel and no tree, Mr Speaker. The problem is Labour trumpets about these deals and then is completely sketchy about what's actually been agreed. Just like the US-UK tech deal, we've now found out from President Trump that he's put that deal on ice. So despite all of that golden carriage action in September, despite the Prime Minister honking on about his negotiating skills, can the Secretary of State confirm the Prime Minister has actually nailed down none of the key details on pharma, no zero tariff pact on steel, and no deal on tech?
We have signed a groundbreaking US-UK tech partnership deal that has delivered over £30 billion of investment into the UK, alongside our biggest ever investment into research and development, 4 AI growth zones, delivering 13,000 jobs in North Wales, South Wales, the South East and the North East. Our plan to upskill 7.5 million workers in AI skills and backing great British scientists, that's a record I am proud of. It's a pity she remains the ghost of Christmas past.
Right, let us come to Prime Minister's questions. Melanie Ward.
Question number 1, please, Mr Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the anti-Semitic terror attack on Bondi Beach was sickening. It has had a profound impact around the world, including on Jewish communities here in the United Kingdom. These incidents are not isolated. We think of the appalling attack at Heaton Park earlier this year, and these incidents are chillingly focused on some of the holiest days in the Jewish calendar. Mr Speaker, I've been in touch over the last few days with the Community Security Trust, the Home Office and the Chief Rabbi about security for Hanukkah events here in the United Kingdom. Last night we held a Hanukkah reception in Downing Street, where I reaffirmed our fight against the poison of anti-Semitism. We will use all of our powers to make sure Jewish communities are safe and secure, as they should be. Mr Speaker, may I also take this opportunity to wish you, all the staff in Parliament, every member and their families across the House a very happy Christmas. And a little festive advice to those in reform. If mysterious men from the East appear bearing gifts, this time report it to the police. Mr Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I associate myself with the Prime Minister's condemnation of the horrific attacks in Australia. We must be clear that anti-Semitic terrorism is always an outrage. Mr Speaker, at Christmas time, many across our country will be thinking of Bethlehem, where the situation remains extremely difficult. The government's important scheme for students from Gaza with scholarships to study in the UK expires on the 31st of December, but a number of scholarship holders and their children have not yet been permitted to leave Gaza. If this scheme closes, these brilliant Palestinians will lose their university places and we will lose their talent. Will the Prime Minister extend the UK's existing scheme into next year to prevent this from happening?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Can I thank her? And I know that Gazan students face huge challenges in taking up their places, and we're considering solutions for those yet to arrive. But I do want to be clear, I want them to be able to take up their places and continue their education in the United Kingdom. I'm proud we've also created the medical evacuation scheme for children from Gaza, and last week I met some of those who've been brought to the United Kingdom for specialist treatment in the NHS. Mr. Speaker, we continue to focus on aid into Gaza, and I'll make sure my honourable friend is kept updated on the next steps for students.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Beno.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for his words on anti-Semitism? What happened at Bondi Beach was an atrocity. But words of solidarity are not enough. We know the evil we face. Islamic extremism is a threat to Western civilization. It abuses our democracies and subverts our institutions. It is incompatible with British values. So it is not enough just to protect Jewish communities. We must drive Islamic extremism out of this country. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to send my best wishes to our armed forces, to the emergency services and to everyone who will be working over Christmas. And I would also like to take this opportunity to wish you, Mr. Speaker, the House staff and all members of this House, including the Prime Minister, a very Merry Christmas. Mr. Speaker, it is the Prime Minister's second Christmas in Downing Street, and by his own admission, he's not in control. He says nothing happens when he pulls the levers. Does he blame himself or the levers?
Mr. Speaker, I'll just set out what we've achieved this week, Mr. Speaker. We're setting out our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy tomorrow. That'll me specialist support for abuse victims and the 999 calls experts.
Sorry, Prime Minister. I expect better from you. Ex-serving officer, we expect the standards of a good officer. Prime Minister.
The next lever was 500 jobs protected at Grangemouth. Partnering with INEOS to safeguard the plant's future. Next lever was Erasmus scheme, which is being announced later on today from January 2027. The next lever, Mr. Speaker, the Employment Rights Bill, became law. The biggest uplift in workers' rights in a generation. I've got a whole more list, Mr. Speaker. I could go on for a very long time.
Not sure exactly what that had to do with the question, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, the Prime Minister promised economic growth, but the only thing that's grown is his list of broken promises. He promised to reduce unemployment, but yesterday, unemployment hit its highest level since the pandemic. It has gone up every single month since he came into office. Why is that?
Mr. Speaker, the facts are these: 350,000 people, more people in work this year. We've got the lowest inactivity rate for 5 years. We are taking measures to address this, particularly with the young unemployed. I would remind them that under their watch, unemployment averaged 5.4%, higher than it is today.
You two.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know what planet the Prime Minister is living on, but unemployment has gone up every levels. Graduate recruitment, lowest ever. He promised that he wouldn't increase taxes on working people, but he has. Last year, he increased national insurance. Last month, he froze income tax thresholds. So will the Prime Minister finally be honest and admit he broke his promise on tax?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud that in the budget we had record investment into our public services, we stabilised the economy, and we bore down on the cost of living. They voted against all those measures. But, Mr. Speaker, it is a season of goodwill. Let me congratulate the Leader of the Opposition. She's broken her own record since last week. Last week, 21 former Tory MPs had walked away to reform. She's broken that record because this week it's gone to 22. The former Vice-Chair has now gone. So the question is, whose next. Now, it's hard to name anyone. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to name anyone because, according to the Shadow Transport Secretary, the Shadow Cabinet is full of, he says, non-entities. That's you lot. He should know.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is talking about non-entities as he looked at his cabinet. A bunch of turkeys. They could fit right in a Bird and Matthews factory. And he is one to talk. Last week, his MPs were calling him a caretaker Prime Minister. After what he's done to the economy, they should be calling him the Undertaker Prime Minister. Let's look at what else he's promised. The Prime Minister gave his word that he would help pubs. Yet they face a 15% rise in business rates because of his budget. Will the Prime Minister be honest and admit his taxes are forcing pubs to close?
Prime Minister, she knows very well that the temporary relief that was put in place during COVID has come to an end. That was the scheme they put in place. We supported it, but it was always a temporary scheme coming to an end. We've now put in place a £4 billion transitional relief. We've also taken other measures, creating hospitality zones, greater licensing freedoms and tackling late payments. We're also bearing down on the cost of living, Mr. Speaker, so more people enjoy a drink or a meal out, freezing rail fares, freezing prescription charges, £150 off energy bills, driving wages up. What did they do in relation to each of those, Mr. Speaker? They voted against each and every one of those measures.
Mr. Speaker, what pubs has he been speaking to? They've been barred from all of them. And let's look at another broken promise. I don't know why they're shaking their heads. It's not my fault they've got nowhere to drown their sorrows. Let's look at another broken promise. He promised to end the doctors' strike. He gave the doctors a 28.9% pay rise. What did he get in return? This morning, they've gone back on strike for the third time. In the middle of winter, in the middle of the worst flu crisis in years. Mr. Speaker, this shouldn't be allowed. We already banned strikes by the police and the army. Why doesn't he put patients first, show some backbone, and ban doctors' strikes?
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear about the strikes. They're dangerous and utterly irresponsible. And my message to resident doctors is don't abandon patients, work with us to improve conditions and rebuild the NHS. But, Mr. Speaker, they left the NHS absolutely on its knees, waiting lists through the roof and confidence absolutely rock bottom. And, Mr. Speaker, I take no lecture for them on industrial harmony. More days were lost to strike action on their watch than any year since the 1980s.
Mr. Speaker, of course he's not going to ban doctor strikes. He doesn't have the baubles. The trade unions didn't just buy him. They can shake their heads all they like. We all know who's running their party, and it's not him. The trade unions didn't just buy him for Christmas, they bought him for life. And this matters for all those people out there facing a difficult new year. The Prime Minister has lost control. It's not the levers that don't work, it's him. He's breaking every promise he has made. He promised to bring down unemployment, it's up. He promised he wouldn't increase taxes, they're up. He promised to end the doctors' strike, they're on strike again. Mr. Speaker, he said his main mission was economic growth, but the economy is shrinking. With a year like that, is it any surprise that all his MPs want for Christmas is a new leader?
Mr. Speaker, we got the Muppets Christmas Carol here. The defections are happening so fast that at Christmas the Leader of the Opposition is going to be left home alone. And the member for Runcorn is clearly dreaming of a white Christmas. But, Mr. Speaker, we know what the Leader of the Opposition wants for Christmas. Her list to Santa is this. Dear Santa, please freeze the minimum wage. Please push hundreds of thousands of kids back into poverty and scrap maternity leave. Merry Christmas from the Tories. Mr. Speaker, what we're bringing is cheaper mortgages, new rights for workers and lifting 500,000 people out of poverty. We've achieved more in 14 months than they achieved in 14 miserable years.
Jessica Bourne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Ukraine is facing a fourth Christmas of war and loss. A Ukrainian family I met last week spoke movingly of the help and support that they had received from our community in Newport, but also of the real pain of separation from loved ones still in Ukraine serving near the front line. Will the Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to the bravery of these families and those that support them? And can he also take this opportunity for them in giving the House an update on what more we can do from this government to support our Ukrainian friends?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I heartily agree with her? British families have shown incredible kindness and hospitality. We have been working by way of update with our allies on frozen Russian assets to support Ukrainians in their hour of need. Today, Mr. Speaker, I can announce that we're issuing a licence to transfer £2.5 billion from the sale of Chelsea Football Club. That's been frozen, those funds, since 2022. My message to Abramovich is this: the clock is ticking. Honour the commitment that you made and pay up now. And if you don't, we're prepared to go to court so every penny reaches those whose lives have been torn apart by Putin's illegal war.
Sir Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I wish you, everyone in the whole House and the whole country, a merry and peaceful Christmas? And can I join the Prime Minister in expressing our horror at the appalling anti-Semitic terror attacks on Bondi Beach on the first day of Hanukkah? Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and friends of all those who've been killed and injured in this senseless act of violence, and our thoughts with the whole Jewish community. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure we've all heard British Jews explain how they no longer feel safe in this country. Many of us have friends who volunteer to put on stab vests and stand guard outside their synagogue, and at Heaton Park in October, we saw why. Anti-Semitism is real, it is poisonous. We must all work together to stamp it out. The Board of Deputies have called for a comprehensive government strategy to tackle anti-Semitism. So will the Prime Minister commit to that today and set out what concrete steps he's taking to make sure Jewish people are safe in Britain?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank him for raising this really important issue? And it is really important that we have actions that match the words that we have expressed in response to these horrific attacks. The actions we've taken so far are increasing the funding for Jewish security up to £28 million. I'm pleased to do that, but I'm sad to do that. Having to pay more money to provide security for people to be at their place of worship and to go to school is a sad thing for this country to have to do. I've ordered a review of protest and hate crime laws to stop protests breeding hatred. We're looking at new police powers to deal with repeat and targeted protests. And we've launched a review and training to tackle anti-Semitism in the NHS. There are other steps that we are talking to the community about taking, but all of those actions have already started.
Red David.
Thank the Prime Minister for that answer, and I hope he will look at the proposal from the Board of Deputies. I think we can work across this House to end the scourge of anti-Semitism. Mr. Speaker, turning to the NHS, even before today's irresponsible strike by the resident doctors, patients were facing a terrible winter crisis. Thousands have been left on trolleys in hospital corridors for hours, no privacy, no dignity, some even sorting themselves because there was no response. And there's been some tragic cases, Mr. Speaker, some people even dying on those trolleys and left undiscovered for hours. And the expectation is that this could get worse. So will the Prime Minister make this his #1 priority to end this crisis, with a mass vaccination programme to stop so many people ending up in hospital with this virus, and funding the social care places people need to leave hospital when they're ready?
Can I say how unacceptable the conditions that some are enduring in our hospitals are? And there's no excuse, and it is our #1 priority. On vaccinations, We've had over 17 million patients vaccinated this year. That's an increase on last year, but I want to drive that up again next year because vaccinations make such a difference, both to patients and those who are staff within the hospitals, and of course with action on social care. Thank you.
Mother McAvoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Merry Christmas to you and all your fantastic staff. Prime Minister, 2025 has been a momentous year for Darlington, Britain's best town, but there is much more to do. I met a lovely woman out door knocking recently, and she works 12-hour night shifts at a care home in the town. Her colleagues are on minimum wage, and many care workers across the town aren't even paid time and a half for working on Christmas Day. Like so many in her profession, she wants the system fixed, not for herself, but for her residents. I believe that starts with radical improvements to care workers' terms and conditions. Prime Minister, this workforce of mostly women do essential, skilled and exhausting work without fuss, fanfare and still without fair pay. They deserve better. What can I tell the Darlington care workers will improve for them by this time next year at Christmas?
Can I thank her? Carers are incredibly skilled workers. My sister is one of them, and I'm very proud of them and her for their invaluable work. I'm pleased that we've increased the carers' allowance earnings limit by the largest amount since it was introduced, and we're providing £500 million to fund the first ever fair pay agreement through the Employment Rights Act, which was passed yesterday to make sure care workers are properly recognised and rewarded.
Stephen Flynn.
It's the season of goodwill, so with that in mind, I don't intend, it is indeed the season of goodwill, so with that in mind, I don't intend on asking the Prime Minister about his broken promises on energy bills, the 1,000 jobs being lost in the North Sea, the fact that Peter Mandelson is still a member of the House of Lords. I won't even ask him about the chaos that is engulfing the Labour Party, his budget and indeed his own leadership. No, Mr. Speaker, I simply want to wish the Prime Minister happy Christmas. How does he intend on spending his final one in Downing Street?
Prime Minister.
I'm going to get an update from the Chancellor on Grangemouth in just a minute. He's clearly not interested in Grangemouth. You would have thought on a day like this that he'd want to welcome the £120 million of investment into Groundwood. It's a landmark investment protecting 500 jobs and hundreds more across Scotland's supply chain. And he can't even bring himself to mention it. Mr. Speaker, that's on top of the Typhoon defence jobs in Edinburgh and shipbuilding jobs on the Clyde. And after decades of SNP rule, they're totally out of ideas. They can't even welcome the Grangemouth news. Scotland deserves change next year with Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2020, my constituents, John and Karen Rowlands, lost their son Andrew in a road collision. He was just 18 years old and a passenger. Like too many others, Mr. Speaker, the driver of the car should never have been on the road. He was underage, unlicensed and uninsured and bought the car on social media using cash. Can the Prime Minister tell me how bereaved families like the Rowlands can have a meaningful say on our road safety strategy and ensure the right checks are in place to prevent future tragedies?
Prime Minister.
Can I send, I'm sure, condolences of the whole House to Andrew's family. It's an awful case, and every life that's lost to dangerous driving is a tragedy. In terms of the range of measures that we're taking to protect young drivers, they include penalties for driving uninsured and unlicensed, and measures to reduce the risks posed by unroadworthy vehicles. And in terms of influence of her and her constituents, I'll be very happy to set up an appropriate meeting for her constituents.
Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for confirming a Cornwall-only devolution deal since my last PMQ. In 1988, over 20,000 North Cornwall constituents were poisoned by the South West Water Authority. In a recent BBC documentary, strong suggestions were made of a cover-up by the Thatcher government. None of those victims have ever been properly compensated, and today South West Water poison my constituents with impunity with their constant sewage dumping. Christmas swims across Cornwall have been cancelled again, while constituents like William Howes in Padstow have been hospitalised. Will the Prime Minister please meet with me to finally deliver justice to all water poisoning victims and make sure this never happens again?
Prime Minister.
Well, it is right to remind us of what was a terrible scandal, and I will ask the Water Minister to meet him and his constituents to discuss it. He and the public are right to be furious that companies are still polluting our seas, lakes and rivers. Mr Speaker, we've taken action banning bonuses for bosses in 6 polluting companies, changing the law so that those who hide sewage bills can be locked up, and issuing almost £30 million in fines to clean up waterways. We're clearing up the mess that the party over there left, like everything else.
Claudia Bams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The West Midlands car industry is well famous, and this government backs our automotive sector. We got a US trade deal, and when criminals shut down production at Jaguar Land Rover, we back the supply chain. Brilliant companies like JH Lavender in my constituency. What a contrast with the member for Clacton, not here as usual, who said, "I predict Jaguar will now go bust," and they deserve to. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that the workers of the West Midlands and the entire country need a Labour government and can't afford the economic vandalism of Reform UK?
Well, apparently the leader of Reform's in the lounge. I know he likes an early getaway at Christmas to get to his place in France. But, Mr Speaker, he lobbied for economic sanctions against his own country when he was in the United States, with no thought for British workers and zero patriotism. The difference is our US deal secured the best deal for the car industry, providing certainty for the workforce at JLR. And there's more good news, Mr Speaker, for the car industry this week, because Nissan is now building its new electric Leaf in Sunderland. That's the difference a Labour government makes.
Sir Julian Smith.
Compliment the Prime Minister on the work he's done on Ukraine and wish him well over Christmas on that topic. Mr Speaker, pubs are at the centre of rural communities in areas such as North Yorkshire. They are under more pressure than ever before. Could I urge the Prime Minister and the Government to look again at the rates issue and to look at how to relax the transitional relief for those pubs, many of which are otherwise going to close?
Prime Minister. Mr Speaker, it is an important sector. At the heart of this challenge is the end of the temporary relief that was put in place during COVID, and that's why we put in place the transitional measures. And investing £500,000 into a hospitality support scheme to help rural pubs diversify. On issues like the cost of living, we've taken a number of measures to make it easier for people to go out and enjoy themselves in pubs, and we'll always look at what measures we can put in place to support pubs.
Ed Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. People across Lichfield, Burntwood and the villages will be looking forward to a very happy new year, not least because of this government's commitment to the Midland Rail Hub project, which will revolutionise rail travel across the West Midlands and further afield. We are all really eager to see a better service between Lichfield and Birmingham as soon as possible, though. So will the Prime Minister join my campaign for a more regular service on the cross-city line? And can he confirm that rail commuters will benefit from frozen fares because of this Labour government?
Well, Mr Speaker, the hub means more regular services for up to 15 stations across the region. That's vital after the Lichfield to Birmingham service was slashed under the previous government. The construction will create around 13,000 jobs, and we're delivering them as quickly as possible with Network Rail awarding design contracts this week. Mr Speaker, we're also freezing rail fares. That's the first time that that's happened in 30 years, saving his constituents about £90 a year on the commute to Birmingham.
Andrew Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. As the ghost of Christmas past scoops up the Prime Minister from his slumber in number 10 this year, I wonder what he will show him on Christmas Eve. Maybe it would be the devastated family farmer putting up the for sale sign on the yard, or the children hugging each other as their independent school closes, or any of the 100,000 hospitality workers who have lost their jobs, or the millions of families that are trying to work out how they will pay their tax bill to fund the ever-growing welfare state. So is it no wonder that the ghost of Christmas future has given up on this Prime Minister, and all that is is for him to get his bag of coal from Santa and his P45 from his own MP.
Happy Christmas. I saw that the honourable member was asking the public to suggest questions for today. I actually put in a bid, Mr Speaker. I filled it in. I assume he missed the question, I assume. I said he should ask about the 6,000 well-paid, high-skilled jobs we've secured in his constituency, building typhoons. Thanks for an £8 billion deal with Turkey. I'm disappointed that he didn't want to talk about good, well-paid jobs in his constituency secured by this Labour government.
Mr Speaker, just days before Christmas, heartbroken Derbyshire families and staff have learnt that the Reform-led council are closing 8 care homes, including Rowthorne in Amber Valley. And that comes just days after learning that the council's cost-saving claims were entirely fabricated. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that when Reform talk about Doge, what they're actually talking about is cutting vital public services care homes? And will he join me in urging Derbyshire County Council to think again?
Prime Minister. Well, it is deeply concerning to hear about the closure of 8 Derbyshire care homes by the Reform-led Derbyshire Council. It will be hugely concerning to residents and to their families, while we're making £3.7 billion of extra funding available to councils to fund social care. And let me say to the member for Clacton, relaxing in the lounge, Christmas is a time for forgiveness. It's never too late to apologise to former classmates.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Labour's tax rises mean and higher unemployment, and the reason for the tax rises is government spending. The Prime Minister personally promised the country to limit spending increases to £9.5 billion a year. So what mandate did he have in his first 2 budgets to increase annual spending 15 times faster by £146 billion?
Wow. Mr Speaker, we had a mandate to change because we inherited major challenges across the country. If only he had done something to solve these problems when he was working in Downing Street. He left a complete mess.
Neil Duncan-Jordan.
Mr Speaker, over the past few weeks I've been contacted by a number of constituents who work in the health and care sector because they are concerned about the proposed changes to the rules surrounding indefinite leave to remain. These individuals came to this country to do a job we asked them to do, and then we decided to change the rules halfway through the process. Does the Prime Minister agree that if we are to be a proud, rules-based nation, going back on our word to people who are contributing to our society and building lives here is not only just unfair, it's also profoundly un-British?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, we're replacing a failed settlement system with one that is fair and recognises contribution. It is right to apply more stringent controls, and we're currently consulting on the right approach. I do recognise the huge contribution of those working in our NHS and will not change the rules for those who already have settled status.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Jimmy Lai is 79 and is a British citizen. He has already been in prison in Hong Kong for 5 years, simply for being a journalist. If he receives a further sentence on the 12th of January, he is likely to die in prison. Will the Prime Minister make clear that his visit to Beijing can only go ahead if Jimmy Lai is released?
Prime Minister.
I thank him for raising this really important case, and as he knows, we continually raise this with our counterparts and will continue to do so. And I condemn the conviction. Obviously, we await the sentence, but it's absolutely clear that he's been targeted by the authorities, and this is wrongful, and I call it out. It is important that we continue to engage so that we can raise this issue with those counterparts.
Sam Carling.
In September, a National Secular Society report
highlighted alarming numbers of extremist religious organisations in the UK from various faith traditions expressing hideous views about women, including promoting female genital mutilation and denying the existence of marital rape. Many of these are registered as charities and therefore eligible for various tax exemptions, as well as thousands or even millions of pounds in public money through gift aid. So will the Prime Minister, as part of the government's mission to halve violence against women and girls, support my campaign for a review of charity law and regulation so that we can make sure the UK taxpayer isn't funding extremism and hate?
Minister. Can I thank him for raising this really important issue? The scale of violence and abuse suffered by women and girls is a national emergency, and the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy will be published tomorrow, setting out concrete steps in order to deal with this. We've already taken action to protect victims, including placing domestic abuse specialists in the first 5 999 control rooms, and we're launching a new national policing centre to coordinate police response and target these crimes. I'll make sure that ministers look specifically at the issues that he's raised.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Minister of State for Justice declined a meeting with the representatives of a number of hunger strikers in prison at the present time. These are all remand prisoners. They're not convicted of anything. Since then, a further prisoner, Kazam, has been taken to hospital, as have others. Many people are very concerned about the regular breaches of prison conditions and prison rules in respect to these hunger strikers. Will he make arrangements for the Ministry of Justice to meet representatives of the hunger strikers to discuss these breaches of the conditions that they're experiencing at the present time?
Prime Minister.
Well, he will appreciate there are rules and procedures in place in relation to hunger strikes, and we're following those rules and procedures.
Abdissam Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. England is the only country in the world with a fully privatised and monopolised water system, and is broken. My constituents in Sheffield Central, like many across the country, continue to face burst water pipes, polluted rivers and rising bills, all while the Chief Executive of Yorkshire Water has taken 1.3 million in bonus payments through an offshore company, and that's on top of her very healthy £660,000 salary. Will the Prime Minister assure the House that the forthcoming Water White Paper will have stronger accountability and put public interest first before bosses' bonuses? And more importantly, will it consider bringing the essential public service back into House?
Prime Minister.
Yes, is the simple answer to that question. And our decisions are already holding polluters to account. Mr. Speaker, new severe fines, banning bonuses, and a record 83 criminal investigations have been launched. We've also secured over £100 billion of investment to upgrade infrastructure to deliver better services to constituents.
Final question, David Mundell.
Mr. Speaker, on Sunday at Arlington Cemetery, I will have the honour of joining family and friends of many of the victims of the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie on the 21st of December 1988, the worst terrorist atrocity in the United Kingdom. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that, especially after all these years, those family and friends deserve both truth and justice? And will the United Kingdom Government continue to do all it can to bring about that outcome?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for raising this? And nobody could forget the shocking scenes at Lockerbie. And I know the huge impact it's had on the community that he grew up in, where people have responded with such compassion and strength. He has rightly stood by their search for justice and truth for all of the intervening years, and I pay tribute to that. All of our thoughts remain with the families and friends of all the victims who deserve truth, and I urge the Scottish authorities to consider the points that he raises.
We'll let the front benches change over. You didn't ask a question, so I don't know you can have a point of order. Sorry? No, but you didn't ask a question. Maybe somebody who'd asked a question would be better. Order. Before we come to the urgent question on the draft Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy Reconciliation Act 2023 remedial order, I remind the House that on the 19th of November 2024, I granted a waiver from the House's sub judice resolution in respect of the related case of Dillon and others versus the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. As such, reference may be made to the case during proceedings. I now call the Shadow Secretary of State, Alex Burkhardt, to ask his UQ.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to make a statement on the draft Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Act 2023 Remedial Order 2025.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his question. This remedial order is a clear signal of the government's commitment to legislation that can command support across Northern Ireland. Its purpose is clear: to formally remove some of the provisions in the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Act 2023 that were found by the courts in Dillon to be incompatible with our human rights obligations. Specifically, this means removing the provisions on immunity from prosecution and the bar on Troubles-related civil cases. Although the immunity provisions never commenced, it is essential that we formally remove them from the statute book. It is the government's belief that there are compelling reasons for proceeding with this order, and this is a view shared by the Joint Committee on Human Rights, which in its report on the 9th of December agreed that the government has such reasons and recommended that Parliament approve the order. The committee stated that, and I quote, "In these exceptional and unusual circumstances, the government has sufficiently compelling reasons to proceed by way of a remedial order." I want to set out what the government believes those reasons to be. Firstly, we must provide clarity on immunity and remove the bar on civil claims as quickly as possible. This is essential for all involved, victims, survivors and veterans, and is a prerequisite for building trust. Secondly, providing this clarity is vital to enable the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery to continue its work. It is my view that while immunity, a key plank of the 2023 Legacy Act, remains on the statute book, it will be difficult for ICRIR to obtain the confidence of all victims and survivors. As the JCHR rightly noted, the legacy of the past continues to have a profound and lasting impact, and we know that families and political parties were vehemently opposed to the immunity provisions. While the repeal of immunity is only one aspect of reforming the arrangements put in place by the 2023 Act, I am confident that its repeal will result in a greater confidence for referrals to be made. Given that many individuals are elderly, they cannot keep on waiting. It is the government's view that these changes should therefore be made through the remedial order as soon as possible. Mr Speaker, the government has a clear mandate, compelling reasons and a procedural basis which the JCHR has endorsed, and the House will have an opportunity to debate the order in the new year.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, for granting this urgent question, which I've asked because I think that there's a very real danger that the government may be about to break the law. And it's very important that the House is aware that the Joint Committee on Human Rights was not in possession of all of the facts when it wrote its report. Last year, the High Court in Belfast found parts of the Legacy Act to be incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. And at the time of the last election, the Conservative government was appealing that highly disputable decision. The incoming Labour government, for reasons it's never disclosed, chose to drop that appeal and subsequently has laid a draft remedial order to amend the legislation. Now, the problem with this, Mr Speaker, is that earlier this year, the Northern Ireland Veterans Movement was granted permission to intervene in the case before the Supreme Court. And on the 15th of October this year, Lord Wilson Casey, acting for the movement, did just that and gave written and oral submissions which the court are now considering. Consequently, it's entirely possible that the declarations of incompatibility relied on by the Secretary of State to lay the remedial order will be quashed. The case is very much live, and this is very important because under Section 10 of the Human Rights Act, a government only has the authority to use a remedial order unless and until all appeals in relation to declarations of incompatibility have been determined or abandoned. This test is not met. And if the government decides to push ahead with its remedial order, not only will it be acting ultra vires, it will set a terrible precedent which will mean that future governments may use remedial orders in ways that they were never intended to use. To avoid this, all the government needs to do is to commit to not pushing its remedial order to a vote until the Supreme Court has finally ruled. Will the Secretary of State make that commitment?
Very well done.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for the point that he has raised, but I would say to him that the argument he puts is not correct. The appeal was abandoned by the government in July 2024, and he says, for reasons that have never been disclosed, the government has been absolutely clear from the beginning, we disagree with immunity and we are committed to repeal and replace the Legacy Act. And Section 10 gives a Secretary of State the ability to make a remedial order when a declaration of incompatibility has been made and any appeal has been determined or abandoned. It has been abandoned by the government. Now, the honourable gentleman has suggested that the ongoing Supreme Court appeal in Dillon means that the conditions have not been met and therefore suggests that we may lack the vires to lay this order. I do not agree with his assessment and have made the position clear to the honourable member in the correspondence that we have had, I think an exchange of 2 emails and 2 letters. I can confirm to the House that in July 2024 the government formally abandoned its appeal concerning the declaration of incompatibility relating to immunity from prosecution. That declaration was not part of the appeal that is now before the Supreme Court. And the fact that the Northern Ireland Veterans Movement was granted permission to intervene does not alter this legal reality.
Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last month, the House debated the Troubles Bill, and we heard many moving contributions about the devastating loss experienced by families, including military families, many of whom are still seeking answers. Does the Secretary of State agree that the voices of those whose governments, of the government's legislation, what it's for, should be at the forefront of our minds when we debate it and every time we debate it? Thank you.
I do agree with my honourable friend, and I would just further say that the honourable gentleman who speaks for the opposition and the principal opposition party remain, it seems, wedded to immunity, which was well, the honourable gentleman says once again, as he does in all these debates, conditional immunity. I think the last time we debated it, I reminded him what the legislation of the last government said. It said that the Commission must give immunity if the conditions for giving immunity are met, which are quite clearly, well, the honourable gentlemen have not reminded themselves of what their legislation said. All that was required was that for somebody to come forward and to say what they had done, and if what they had done was an offence, then the Commission must grant them immunity. And I would say to the opposition that at some point they do need to recognise that that provision for immunity for terrorists, because the last government said we wish to give immunity to terrorists, had no support in Northern Ireland. And I'm sorry that they don't recognise that, because I've said on many occasions progress cannot be made in trying to deal with the problem of legacy
when the provision that is in the current legislation, which we are committed to repeal and replace, has no support in the place that suffered more than anywhere else during the course of the Troubles.
Can I remind colleagues, if they wish to ask a question, they should be bobbing and try and reduce chuntering from the front benches. I ask the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Dr Al Pinkerton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the introduction of a remedial order is welcome and necessary, even if its timing is potentially vexed. This remedial order promises to finally end the policy of conditional immunity that was integral to the 2023 Legacy Act, a policy that may have had benign intentions, but which did put us at odds with our international legal obligations and which regrettably drew a moral equivalence between UK service personnel and terrorist paramilitaries. I note the Joint Committee on Human Rights' second report, published last week, which recommended its approval. However, I also note that committee's concern regarding the unusual sequencing and timing of the remedial order in relation to the forthcoming primary legislation. Now, given the overtly political processes that led to the 2023 Act, there is an additional responsibility, I would suggest, on this government to ensure that this process is handled properly and that the process, as much as the policy, is seen to be fair-handed. There is a broad recognition of the need to repeal and replace the 2023 Legacy Act, but we also need to acknowledge that the removal of conditional immunity has created real anxiety, particularly among veterans groups. They fear the risk of prosecution. And so I also welcome the Secretary of State's letter circulated yesterday, Annex A in particular. So can I just ask the Secretary of State, if I may, three things. First of all, to clarify...
You have exactly 1 minute and you've gone over, so my apologies. Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for what he said and for the support that he gives to what we are seeking to do in the remedial order. I acknowledge the responsibility that the government has. These are quite unusual circumstances, and the reason that we are here debating this is because the Joint Committee on Human Rights has acknowledged those unusual circumstances, and despite having made other comments in this report, which we will all have read, has come to the conclusion that they give their approval to this and have recommended that the House support it. And I welcome what the Joint Committee on Human Rights has had to say. I would also point out one other thing. The government, and I'll acknowledge this, did take a bit of time between the JCHR report on the 28th of February and producing the revised draft remedial order on the 14th of October. I just wish to inform the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the reason for that is that we had listened to the representations that have been made, particularly from the other side of the House, on the subject of interim custody orders in respect of sections 46 and 47, and in relation to the Supreme Court judgment in 2020. We reflected on that, and we found what we think is an alternative way of achieving the same objective, and that is to be found in clauses 89 and 90 of the Troubles Bill that is currently before the House. And I would simply point out that the last government tried for 2.5 years to find a way of dealing with the Supreme Court judgment in the Adams case, was not able to do so, eventually accepted. The amendments moved in the other place that became sections 46 and 47, but it was acknowledging the arguments have been made that led the government, to amend the remedial order, which we then put before the House on the 14th of October.
Deputy Speaker, as a member of the Joint Committee on Human Rights, we published our second report on the Northern Ireland Remedial Order on 9th of December. The standing orders of both houses require the JCHR to scrutinise all remedial orders. The committee concluded that the virus of the order was satisfied and that all statutory requirements were fulfilled. However, the committee also felt that the circumstances were that it was only appropriate because the government gave compelling reasons about why this would have to come forward in this way while a bill was progressing through the House and there was a Supreme Court case ongoing. Does the Secretary agree with me that, that although the circumstances, the timing are not ideal, this is the best way forward?
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend. The circumstances are unusual, but the government does believe it has a compelling case, and the JCHR agreed with the government's assessment. Yeah.
Father of the House.
There's been a lot of very complex legal arguments alluded to today, but I think what the public are concerned, what I'm concerned about, is the state of mind of our veterans, some of them quite elderly, who only sought to serve their country decades ago. So the Secretary of State is a very moderate, clever, reasonable person. Given that there's really, in reality, no chance of a successful prosecution, and people would be horrified if there was a prosecution, what comfort can the Secretary of State now give to our veterans?
Well, I agree with the right honourable gentleman that we only have to look at the figures to see that the prospects of any prosecutions in any cases are increasingly remote because of the passage of time, the difficulty in obtaining evidence. But what the government has done, having listened very carefully to the representations that veterans have made, has been to set out in legislation the protections, and we will return to the House when we consider the bill in committee. Protection from repeated investigation, the right to stay at home, to seek anonymity, protection in old age, protection from cold calling, and the right to be heard. And I hope that when veterans get a chance to see precisely how they're going to work, the fact that they are contained in the legislation, they will reassured that the government is looking out for their interests.
Member Adam Jogi.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's always important for Northern Ireland to be discussed on the floor of this House. We are, after all, one United Kingdom, so I thank the Shadow Secretary of State for putting the question to us. But we must never forget the people of Northern Ireland. So can I ask my honourable friend what recent engagement he's had with victims, survivors and other organisations representing them as part of his work to address the legacy of the past?
I have had many such meetings. The Victims and Survivors Forum, for example, I've met twice in the recent past to explain the legislation that the government has published. I would make the point that there is a great lack of trust on the part of victims and survivors in Northern Ireland who feel they've been let down many times before. And trust undermined it's very hard to rebuild it. They are taking account of the legislation the government has passed. It won't surprise the House if I say I believe it does provide a foundation for moving forward. But it's really, really important, as my honourable friend has said, that their voice is heard and heard loudly.
Stuart Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 12th of November, I raised with the Prime Minister the alarming statement from 9 former generals that attacked the government's approach to lawfare against our armed forces. They said it would erode trust in the justice system and it was a threat to national security. Can the Secretary of State confirm if the Prime Minister has met with these 9 former generals, and has it changed his approach to attacking veterans?
Well, I don't accept the characterisation that the honourable member puts before the House. The government is not engaging in lawfare against veterans. Well, I refute. I've read that letter and many others. I refute the suggestion that the government is engaging in lawfare. We have been meeting a very large number of veterans' organisations. I myself have met the SAS Association and others. Ministry of Defence ministers have met. We are listening, and the House will see when we come to committee stage the results of those considerations, because the government is absolutely determined to ensure that there are proper protections in recognition of the hugely important and dangerous role that those who served in Operation Banner performed in trying to keep the people of Northern Ireland and indeed of the United Kingdom safe.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a member of the JCHR, I'm concerned that the Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary may have inadvertently misled the House when he suggests that our committee did not discharge our role seriously and consider all of the evidence in this case when we produced the report. The report which we produced recommended that this remedial order be made in no small part because of the incredible sensitivity around anything to do with the Northern Ireland Troubles and the need to make sure that we are building bridges across communities, and in no small part too, may I say, Madam Deputy Speaker, because of the seriousness with which the committee feels the Secretary of State takes this issue. It is therefore quite right, I believe, that the Secretary of State make this a remedial order. Does he not agree that it is not right, not serious politics, to play party politics with such a delicate issue?
Well, I would say to my honourable friend, who is a distinguished member of the committee, that I am grateful for the support that the Joint Committee on Human Rights has given for the remedial order and for the government's assessment of the compelling reasons. And personally, I'm not accusing anybody of anything else. I want to try and get this legislation right, as I've said to the House many times before, and I will work with all honourable members who will join me in that task.
Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State is perfectly entitled to pursue a policy desire of removing immunity. Indeed, he knows that my colleagues and I support that position. We found it quite difficult that yet another government was prepared to offer a different variation on immunity for the perpetrators of terror in Northern Ireland. We find that repugnant. So we support the notion that immunity should not stand. But that's not the question before the Secretary of State today. The question before the Secretary of State is whether he should misappropriate a remedial order process, which is about dealing with the incompatibility of human rights law, not incompatibility with his policy objectives. So for as long as a question still remains before the Supreme Court, which it does, though it's not his appeal, it is the Northern Ireland Veterans Movement, is it not better, given he's acknowledged there is an issue of trust on this issue, that he should just at least wait?
I would say two things to the right honourable gentleman. Firstly, I would reject the suggestion that I or the government has misappropriated a remedial order or misapplied Section 10 of the Human Rights Act. And I would cite in aid of that argument that the JCHR, whose job it is to scrutinize, well, he shakes his head, it is their job to scrutinise. If they had come to the House and said, we don't think the case is made, well, the government, of course, would have respected that. That is not what the JCHR said. The second reason is time is not waiting for the victims. It is not. And that is why the government thinks. There are those I've spoken to say, well, as long as it's still on the statute book, even though it has been declared incompatible, we doubt whether we can trust the process. And having decided, Madam Deputy Speaker, to keep the Commission but to reform it, I think it's right we remove that uncertainty as swiftly as possible, and that is what the remedial order is seeking to do.
I think the whole House can agree this is a very serious and sensitive topic. Can I ask members to be mindful with their language and ensure that they're not heckling whilst they are seated? I call Select Committee Member David Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State, you've already confirmed that under the Legacy Act, the immunity provisions were never commenced, and so therefore it's important to say that nobody ever was granted immunity under them. But sticking with the subject of immunity, the three Veterans Commissioners for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales have all said they do not call for immunity under the law, but fairness under it. Does he agree with them?
I agree with that statement completely, which is why I must confess my disappointment that the opposition is still clinging to the notion of immunity, including immunity for terrorists. The Veterans Commissioners are quite right. They want fairness, and that is what the government is determined to deliver.
Sir Edmund Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I just simply say to the Secretary of State, it does seem like ridiculous haste when the Act is going through right now, and that surely to do this when he knows for a fact that there is already an appeal going on does, as has already been said, become abusive in terms of the real purpose of a remedial order. And I suggest to him really that for all the stuff about the fact of people being let off, all to do with the fact of immunity, that's not the issue. The issue today is, are they misusing their powers to rush something through which they could have dealt with through the course of this Act?
Well, I make 2 points to the right honourable gentleman who served with such distinction in Northern Ireland. First of all, as we have just heard, immunity was never commenced. It was declared incompatible. It was also struck down under Article 2. And I reject again the suggestion that the government is somehow abusing the process. If that was an argument, then one might have expected the Joint Committee on Human Rights to have agreed with it. It did not. It heard all of the points that have been put, and it concluded that in these particular circumstances it was right to proceed, and that is why it is recommending to the House that it should support the remedial order.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This week's exhibition in the upper waiting hall is a memorial quilt produced by members of the South East Fermanagh Foundation. It's a very moving way to remember those who have been innocent victims of terrorism. The dates on those quilts panels remind us how long those families have been fighting for justice. Can I ask the Secretary of State what message he wants to send out to every person who has produced one of those quilt panels for theft, but also to all of those other families from this statement today?
Well, I met on Monday night with the families who'd come over for the unveiling of the quilts. Could I say to all members of the House, if you haven't had a chance to go up to the upper waiting hall to look at them, I would urge you to do so, because the story they tell is profoundly moving, but is a reminder of the continuing search for justice that so many people in Northern Ireland have got. And I would look at those quilts and say it is an argument for what we're trying to do to secure legislation that can actually help find those answers for all those people who are remembered on the quilts that are upstairs.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In regards to the Secretary of State and the accusation about rushing this through, he will be conscious of an Irish government that isn't rushing anything through in regards to the support, in regards of what's actually doing. Yesterday, the Justice Minister in the Republic of Ireland received permission from the government to draft priority legislation to enable state bodies to give oral evidence to the UMA inquiry. Madam Deputy Speaker, that was only because the UMA families are taking legal action. Can I ask the Secretary of State what engagement he has had with the Irish government actually in regards to bringing forward legislation that matches what is he bringing forward to this place? And can I actually ask him who's he dealing with at the minute? Because it used to be the Taoiseach Simon Harris, who's now been promoted, or is it the Justice Minister who's bringing forward this, or is it the new FDA Minister?
Well, my most recent meeting, and I have many meetings with Irish ministers and discussions with the Taoiseach of the Taoiseach, was with Helen McAnea, who has just taken over from Simon Harris at the Foreign Affairs Ministry. I very much welcome the fact that the Irish government has announced that it's preparing to draft the legislation, as Simon Harris had committed to me while standing next to me, in time for the next hearings of the Omagh bombing inquiry, because that is evidence that the Irish government intends to fulfil the commitments it's made in the joint framework.
Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to commend the Secretary of State for the care he's taking to be as fast as possible for those victims, survivors and veterans' families who need to hear answers, but the care that he's taking to make sure this is legally correct. And I would echo the comments about the South East Fermanagh Foundation quilt in Parliament today, which reminds us of the need to get those answers for families. And can the Secretary of State confirm that he's concerned as I am that the opposition are just interested in making political points rather than really building peace, which is what we need to do together as members of the House? And would he confirm that the remedial order removes what would have been immunity for terrorists?
Well, I would say to my honourable friend, I think all members of the House have a shared commitment to trying to ensure that the peace that Northern Ireland has enjoyed since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement is maintained. All of us do. We have a difference of view about, in some respects, about the right way of seeking to do that. And I am always willing to be challenged on the arguments that I put on behalf of the government and to challenge the arguments that I hear from the opposition front benches. In the end, we know that we have to deal with this because the last bit of legislation failed to achieve, as someone said earlier, whatever its intentions, failed to achieve its purpose. It did not command support in Northern Ireland, and that is why we have to make progress.
Sir Julian Lewis.
May I just ask the Secretary of State to clarify whether his earlier remarks mean what I think they mean, which is that even if it had not been for the guidance of the Joint Committee on Human Rights, the government would anyway wanted to have repealed the legislation of the Legacy Act. It's a political decision, and given that he said that he did not believe that there would be convictions at the end of this process, does that not mean that there will be several, if not many, trials? And if no one is convicted at the end of the process, how does that help anyone? And how does it avoid just torturing the people who are put through the trial?
Very good. Well, if I may just correct what I think was the interpretation that the Right Honourable Member was putting on what I had said. I made it quite clear a moment ago. Had the Joint Committee on Human Rights reached a different conclusion about the appropriateness of the remedial order, the government would, of course, respect it. I also made clear in my earlier comments, this government came into office committed to get rid of immunity. We've been quite clear about that from the start, and the remedial order will seek to give effect to that. If one looks at the figures, we've discussed prosecutions of veterans. There has been one successful prosecution of a veteran since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. One. And the point I was making is, if you look at the figures, well, there are currently 9 live cases before the courts relating to the Troubles. 7 of them relate to paramilitaries, 6 of those relate to the provisional IRA. And I've heard the argument from those benches opposite, oh, well, none of the paramilitaries are getting prosecuted. That is not the case. It's really important that we have these debates on the basis of facts.
Jim Allister.
The Secretary of State doesn't need me to tell him that he and the government are struggling to command veteran support for his bill. Could I therefore ask him, in order to address that deficit of support, should he not consider an amendment to Clause 3 to have the Veterans Commissioner for Northern Ireland serve on the Legacy Commission? Wouldn't that be a token of making good on the Secretary of State's affirmation that this is about capturing the confidence of veterans and not pursuing lawfare against them?
Well, as I've already indicated, I reject the suggestion that the government is in any way engaging in lawfare against veterans, in the same way that I reject any suggestion there are such things as politically motivated or vexatious prosecutions. Well, the honourable gentleman says from a sedentary position, oh, come on. I've heard those words from opposition members in previous debates on these questions. There will no doubt be a number of amendments and suggestions made when we come to detailed consideration of the bill, and we will consider them at the time.
Sir Geoffrey Cox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if the Secretary of State can assist me with this problem. The Supreme Court is at the moment seized of the issue as to the lawfulness of the declaration of incompatibility. The fact that the government has withdrawn its appeal does not prevent the Supreme Court from ruling on it. Let us suppose the Supreme Court rules that the declaration of incompatibility is void. Suppose that would mean, therefore, that that legal position is that the declaration of incompatibility would be void. And therefore the basis on which the order that the Secretary of State is proceeding on would be removed. Surely it would be prudent to wait to see if the Supreme Court rules on it, because otherwise what will be doing is proceeding with an unlawful order. I wonder if the Secretary... I mean, I'm asking in the spirit of genuine curiosity and inquiry, not political partisanship. If this is going to bring this entire process into disrepute, if what he's doing is acting upon an unlawful basis.
Well, once again, I would say I don't accept that the government is acting on an unlawful basis. Given the honourable gentleman's distinguished legal credentials and experience, I would say to him, I note that he encourages me to speculate on a potential, well, he does, on a potential outcome. The government has to deal with the position as we find it. I've already set out to the House why the government is absolutely clear in its view that because the appeal was withdrawn, we are able to make use of Section 10 of the Human Rights Act in order to remove conditional immunity.
Sarah Potin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton highlighted the need to recruit people into our armed forces in order to protect this nation. My question to the Secretary of State is, how does he expect to do that when those that served gallantly in Northern Ireland face prosecution? Why would young men and women join our armed forces with the risk of that happening to them? What message does that send to those young people?
I would say to the honourable member, I meet many young people in my constituency and other duties who are very keen to come and serve the nation in the armed forces. I am not aware of any figures that suggest that there has been a decline in recruitment. If she's seen them, perhaps she could draw them to my attention, because trying to get dealing with the past right should not affect the willingness, particularly the threats that we face in the modern world, from encouraging young people and others to come forward and serve the nation as people have done over the centuries.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State has spoken of additional protections in his legislation. Why does he think that Operation Banner veterans, some of whom I represent, remain unconvinced and remain troubled? And why does he think that the Irish Prime Minister believes that there are no additional protections? And whilst he's about it, can he do something to reassure veterans who are feeling very unhappy with this, perhaps along the lines of saying categorically that no former terrorists or members of proscribed organisations will serve on the Legacy Commission?
Well, I've already made it clear to the House that those who have engaged in paramilitary activity, as long as I'm in this post, have no intention of appointing them to any of the posts that are contained in the bill. On the protections, I think we all have a responsibility to explain and to point out that they are in the draft legislation in clauses 30, 31, 36, 91, 84, 54, 56, 69 and 8. They are real, tangible protections, and they do respond very directly to the concerns that veterans have raised with the government. The reason we've introduced them is because of our determination to make sure that veterans are treated properly.
Alex Easton.
Deputy Speaker, Secretary of State, the official opposition are saying to hold off on the remedial order until the Supreme Court judgment. Have you actually sought any legal advice on this, and can you share it with the House?
Not you. The word "you" is not appropriate, so if he wants to rephrase and quickly get to his point.
Has the Secretary of State sought any legal advice on the issue, and can he share it with the House? And can he also give us an update on the Irish Government in terms of making sure that the Irish Government produce all legal papers on their role on the IRA and the involvement of the Garda Síochána?
Well, as the honourable gentleman will be well aware, there is a long-standing tradition that the government does not reveal the legal advice it receives. All governments receive legal advice, but we don't share it because that's part of the business of government. I've already made reference to the announcement that the Irish government has made in respect of legislation to enable witnesses to give evidence to the Omagh bombing inquiry, which I welcome.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Secretary of State confirm whether or not the remedial order will have to be voted on in the other place?
Yes, it will be voted on in both houses in the new year.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Despite what the Secretary of State continues to say in this House, the prosecution of elderly veterans has been vexatious. In the Soldier F trial, the judge agreed with the submissions of the defence that the threshold to prosecute was far from being reached. Political interference brought this matter to court. How, if the Secretary of State can't even accept that there's been vexatious prosecutions, does he ensure that this remedial order gives a clear distinction between the bomber who presents him or herself as a victim and the ordinary man and woman or child who were murdered or maimed by the actions of terrorists?
Well, there's the clearest distinction between the two groups of people that the honourable member refers to, and I've made it clear from the dispatch box on a number of occasions. There is absolutely no equivalence between those who sought to protect the public and those who committed the most appalling terrorist atrocities. I have to respectfully disagree with the honourable member, because if she is arguing that prosecutions have been vexatious, she is saying that our independent prosecutors are working on a basis that is out with their task, which is in all cases look at the evidence. Is there a reasonable prospect of a conviction? Is it in the public interest to prosecute? And if we undermine the independence of independent prosecutors, the separation between the government and the court system, we are sunk as a nation. And that is why I'm so firm in saying there is no such thing as a vexatious prosecution.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Notwithstanding the fact that the Secretary of State has said the chances of a successful prosecution are very limited indeed, the fact is the punishment is in the process of investigation and trial in the first place. So will the Secretary of State now look sympathetically at appropriate amendments to the bill to make sure that the bar is raised very, very high, so it's almost impossible for one of our brave veterans to be prosecuted in our courts?
Well, as I've said to the House before, of course I will look carefully at all of the amendments that are put down to the bill when we come to debate it at committee stage and report of the whole House here. The test, as I indicated in answer to the previous question, for prosecutions is the same now. It will be the same in the future as it has been for the last 30, 50, 70 years. Those of greater legal experience will be able to tell the House how long that has been the case. It will not change because it depends on the evidence. What we are doing is setting out in the bill that in order to reinvestigate things, the Commission has to be of the view that it is essential to do so, and that is a very high bar, the word essential.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Canova report was clear in proving that there was no evidence of state collusion or machinations, and yet the Republican drum still bangs to cover the sound of the voices of the innocents, calling for justice and to be heard. So how will the Secretary of State respond to the lack of protection for the service personnel and the perpetual deliberate focus on them, and look at the 2,057 murders carried out by Republicans and the 1,027 loyalist murders which haven't received any justice at all, and will provide yet another whitewash over the blood of the innocents have been shed, and the impact it still has on all of those families throughout the province? Thank you.
Well, I say to the honourable gentleman, for whom I have the greatest respect, I think he and I hope the whole House, share the desire to enable answers to be provided for all those families who are living with the pain of not knowing what happened to their loved ones. The Canova report has made a very important contribution to seeking to uncover the truth. We have drawn on a number of the lessons of Canova in drafting the legislation, including the Victims and Survivors Advisory Panel, because many people said that was one of the great things about the way Canova went about its job. It is in the draft bill that the House will consider again shortly.
Point of order, Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On a point of order, the point I was trying to raise in my question to the Secretary of State was that on any issue to do with the Northern Irish Troubles, we must tread with appropriate solemnity and seriousness. It was therefore disappointing to be accused of being an idiot by the opposition front bench whilst making this very point. So could I ask, what advice would you give me on ensuring that the honourable member for Raleigh and Wickford appropriately apologises, not to me, but to this whole House, for lowering the tone of this serious debate?
If I had heard any inappropriate language, I would have dealt with it very swiftly and dealt with that member involved, and no inappropriate language should be used in the chamber. And a topic such as this, which is highly charged, emotional and very serious, we need to double down and make sure we're using the most appropriate language. Now, Mr Francois, before you respond, please remember you're also responding to me in the chair. No doubt you will not want to displease me either with any of your response going forward. Mr Francois.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm too experienced to try and displease you in any way. For clarity, I was responding to the fact that the honourable gentleman had accused, had accused my right honourable friend of saying something which, as Hansard will prove conclusively in the morning, he clearly did not say. So, if he feels that word, and you, Madam Deputy Speaker, was inappropriate, I withdraw it. But I will say I still believe that the honourable gentleman was wrong.
I do not wish to prolong the debate, and no doubt that will be seen by most as an apology. We have finished this urgent question. I'll give the front benches a few moments to shuffle over. If the Secretary of State would be seated, I can. If the Secretary of State would be seated, I can. Urgent question, Dr. Caroline Johnson.
If the Secretary of State will make a statement on the Pathways Puberty Blockers trial.
Secretary of State, West
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And let me just start by acknowledging the sensitivities around this issue, the strong beliefs held around this House, and for all the division and divided opinion we have, there is a shared determination of everyone, I believe, in this House to do the right thing by a vulnerable group of children and young people. It is for those reasons that I'm taking the course of action that I am. Put simply, that is to follow expert clinical advice and take an evidence-led approach. The CAS review found shocking levels of unprofessionalism, a lack of clinical oversight, and puberty blockers prescribed to children without sufficient evidence that doing so was safe or beneficial to those children and young people. What Dr. Hilary Cass uncovered was a scandal. That is why, on coming to office, I made the temporary ban brought in by my predecessor a permanent ban. Dr. Cass also recommended a thorough study to establish how best to support children and young people suffering gender incongruence. That is the Pathways study. It has 4 main parts, one of which is the clinical trial to study the effects of puberty-suppressing hormones on young people's physical, social and emotional well-being. The other aspects of the Pathways study will track the physical, social and emotional well-being of all young people attending UK NHS gender services. It will look at young people's thinking and brain development, following both those who are and are not taking puberty-suppressing hormones. And it will gather evidence direct from young people, parents and staff about their experiences of living with gender incongruence. The bar for this trial to be approved was extremely high, and oversight will be rigorous. Children cannot consent to being on this trial, so places will require parental consent as well as the assent of young people. And because protecting and promoting the health and well-being of affected young people is our primary concern, there are strict eligibility criteria in place to join the Pathways clinical trial. As such, the number of young people who would expect to qualify for the trial will also be low. Participants must undergo thorough mental and physical assessments and will be followed over a number of years with regular well-being checks. Puberty blockers have also been used to delay puberty in children and young people who start puberty much too early. Use in those cases has been extensively tested and has met strict safety requirements for that use. The study is being led by King's College London and the South London and Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. It has been carefully checked by independent scientists who advise the National Institute for Health and Care Research and by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency and received approval from a research ethics committee. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am treading cautiously in this area because the safety of children must come first.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I first must declare my interest as a consultant paediatrician who has looked after children with gender dysphoria in the past and is likely to do so in the future. And we must remember that there are vulnerable children that we are talking about today. Madam Deputy Speaker, the first and most obvious question is why? Why has this government chosen to fund experiments with puberty blockers on physically healthy children? Despite saying he was comfortable with this trial in a briefing to MPs, the Secretary of State told the media on Friday and Select Committee this morning that he is in fact uncomfortable with it. Why is it even being considered before the data linkage study is complete? 9,000 children went through the Tavistock. Many of them came out regretting being encouraged to irreversibly damage their bodies. We should look carefully at those outcomes before we make the same mistakes. What steps is he taking to secure the data from the Tavistock and have it analysed? What steps is he taking to hold to account those obstructing access to data linkage information? And what assessment has he made of the motivations of those obstructing that data when this is a study to safeguard children? And what of the trial itself? 226 children will go through this trial. Is that a limit or a target? These children will be randomised to getting puberty blockers now or in a year's time. All will be analysed at 2 years. They will still be children. They may only be 11 years old. How can these results demonstrate a meaningful outcome? The control group isn't properly randomised but chosen from the Horizon Intensive Trial Group. Is the Secretary of State concerned that this will introduce bias? The criteria of getting puberty blockers under this trial requires just one parent to consent and for the clinician to think it will benefit the child. But on what basis will the clinician decide? The CAS review said the vast majority of children with gender dysphoria will recover, with only a few persisting with trans identities into adulthood. It is not possible to predict which those children will be. So does he accept that the vast majority of children in this, his treating trial, will be given drugs, will be physically healthy children whose distress would get better without any puberty blockers, and that therefore the vast majority of the children in this trial are being unnecessarily experimented on with risky medications under his leadership?
The Shadow Minister asks why, to which there is a simple answer. Why is because it was recommended by Dr. Cass in the Cass review, which was commissioned by my predecessor, Sir Sajid Javid. I think that was the right thing to do, and it's why when my predecessor brought forward the Cass review, I supported it in opposition and certainly didn't try and play politics with an extremely vulnerable group of children and young people. In terms of why, I'll tell her why, because under the previous government, those puberty-suppressing hormones were prescribed without proper oversight, supervision or safety, and we didn't hear a peep for years about that fact until Dr. Cass, commissioned by Sir Sajid Javid, who deserves enormous credit for it, did the study that was published, widely supported, with this recommendation. And they may have changed their tune in opposition, but I do remember what the Conservatives said in government when they published the Cass review and supported its recommendations. And I think that is a real shame. She accuses me of inconsistency, so let me be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker. Am I comfortable that this clinical trial has undergone the proper process and ethical approval to ensure the highest standards and supervision? Yes, I'm comfortable about that. Am I uncomfortable about puberty-suppressing hormones for this group of young people, for this particular conditions? Yes, I am, because of risks. It is why I was also uncomfortable when I put in place upheld the temporary ban by my predecessor, but then put in place a permanent ban. The reason I was uncomfortable with that too is because I had to look children and young people in the eye and their parents who told me in no uncertain terms that that decision was harmful to them, as have many other clinicians who've opposed that decision. And the reason why, whatever my discomfort in this extremely sensitive area, I have made this decision is because I am following clinical advice. And because as Health Secretary, it is my responsibility to follow expert advice. And had the Tavistock Clinic faced such challenge and scrutiny a decade ago, we wouldn't be in this mess. The Conservatives were right to commission the Cass review. They were right to accept its recommendations. I accept there is now a difference on this particular recommendation. I would urge members not to walk away from the cross-party consensus we built behind that approach, to build on the work that Dr Cass has done. As for the important questions she raises, there will be 2 groups within the trial, as well as a further control group of children and young people with gender incongruence who do not receive puberty-suppressing hormones. At least 226 participants are required in order to detect a statistically significant difference between the 2 treatment groups. However, this is not a target, and no young person will find themselves on this trial because there is a drive to make sure there is a certain number of young people participating. In order to participate in this trial, it has to have the most robust clinical oversight from clinicians within the service, as well as national oversight and the consent of parents. And it is only where it is deemed that young people would benefit that they will be on this programme. She asked about the data linkage study. That's important. The data linkage study will be undertaken. When the data linkage study is completed, it will not provide us with the same evidence as this clinical trial. That's why Dr Cass made a distinction between this trial and the data linkage study. She asks about the motivations of those who withheld data. That is an extremely important question. I think it is utterly appalling that anyone in a position of responsibility in the NHS withheld data on a very vulnerable group of children and young people. I also accept that while there were many people in the Tavistock Clinic involved in these services, the fact that Dr Cass found such a lack of rigour, such a lack of standards, such a lack of proper oversight is disgraceful. And it is the clinicians who are well-meaning and ideologically driven that have given me most cause for concern in this whole debacle and have done more harm to children and young people and the trans community than most other people who've taken part in this debate and discussion. Finally, I do appreciate the work that Dr Cass has done. I'm glad that she is in the other place, bringing welcome scrutiny. Were she not supportive of this approach, I may think again. She's given her recommendation, she's given her support. I'm following clinical advice. It is not comfortable, but I do believe it is the right thing to do on balance.
Select Committee Member Danny Beales.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The front bench opposite asks why. Well, why? Because trans people exist and their health needs exist. And as the spokesperson for the government has clearly outlined, an independent review made a series of recommendations. There were clearly failures of healthcare, and a further recommendation was a clinical trial to address this issue. I believe the opposition supported the Cass review, but when it comes to implementing this part of it, suddenly there's collective amnesia on the benches opposite about what Dr Cass recommended. And doesn't the Secretary of State agree that in the absence of a trial, there isn't no access to these drugs? We know that young people are seeking out private provision. They are seeking unregulated providers of these drugs, and therefore a clinical trial is both appropriate and the best and safest way of managing any potential risks.
I thank my honourable friend. I have to say that risk he sets out was one of the considerations that I had to weigh up. Firstly, when upholding the temporary ban, then when making the ban permanent. And I do worry that outside of a trial, we may continue to see unsafe or unethical practice, and I think we will be doing a service to medicine in this country as well as internationally if we have a high-quality trial with the highest standards of ethics, approvals, oversight and research from some of our country's leading universities and healthcare providers to make sure that for this particular vulnerable group of children and young people, we're taking an evidence-based approach to health and care.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Morgan, you have up to 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would hope that everyone in this House can agree that medical treatment should always follow the evidence on safety and effectiveness. And it's right that expert clinicians are building this evidence base, and therefore right that the government is seeking to run this trial, because it should be led by evidence and not by ideology. So, given that the numbers on the trial are going to be very small, and the waiting list for talking therapies, which is so important for children and their parents, is very, very long, with hundreds of thousands on the waiting list, can the Secretary of State explain how he will increase access to NHS talking therapies so people can get the help that they need and deserve? And in a field with so little research, can he confirm if the Pathways trial is looking at international best practice in order to take learnings from abroad?
I'm grateful to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for her question. I can absolutely assure her that we are doing that wider research, that of course we will take into account high quality international evidence as well as the research we're undertaking domestically. It is so important that we recognise that for many young people with gender incongruence, even if approved, puberty blockers will never be the right medication. And one of the things that I have been most saddened by with the discourse among adults in this debate, many of whom should know better, is that by elevating puberty blockers to the status that they have received in public discourse and debate, there are many young people out there who think that not only is this the gold standard of care, but it is the only care available. And of course, that is not true. NHS England has opened 3 new children and young people's gender services in the North West London and Bristol, with a 4th planned for the East of England in 2026, and we aim to have a service in every region of England in the coming years. These services use a different model with multidisciplinary teams, including mental health support and paediatrics within specialist children's hospitals to provide good clinical care. The new services will increase capacity, reduce waiting times so that patients can be seen sooner and closer to home. And we've also commissioned additional support for young people waiting to be seen through local children and young people's mental health services.
Only because I can't see her in any more pain. Preet Gill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for his leadership. But can I just say, as a former Children's Services Manager, I am concerned that credible safeguarding warnings from clinicians and academics about puberty suppression in children are not actually being heard. So will the Secretary of State meet those experts and review the younger age limit for participation in this trial, given that children as young as 10 are currently set to be involved?
I'm really grateful to my honourable friend for her question, and let me reassure her and the House that I am absolutely open to receiving representations and evidence from clinicians involved in the care of children and young people with insight, expertise and data, including those who might be critical of the approach that the trial team is setting out, or indeed critical that the CAS review included this recommendation. The reason why I think that is important is because of the many things that's gone horribly wrong in this area was the silencing of whistleblowers, the silencing of rigorous debate and discussion. Of course, we've got to do that with due care and sensitivity in mind, for young people in particular in this vulnerable group, for the wider trans community who feel extremely vulnerable in this country at the moment, including as a result of decisions I have taken as the Health and Social Care Secretary. So we have to consider all of that in the round. But we must make sure at all times we're following the evidence, that we're open to scrutiny and challenge, and that where we're making these finely balanced judgments, that we're doing so with rigorous debate, the testing of the arguments, the testing of the evidence and data. And that's why I do welcome the urgent question in this discussion.
Committee Member Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State said earlier that there is an extremely high bar to him stepping in and stopping these tests using puberty blockers. What bar could be higher than a government protecting children from being tested on with drugs specifically to stop or alter their sexual development. There is not a unified clinical view on this. It is his choice. He's the Secretary of State. These tests are on him.
Look, I certainly don't need to be told what my responsibilities are in relation to this. I always take responsibility for decisions I take. I acknowledge the extent to which he and members of his party are seeking to weaponise this issue and to personalise it. We can just simply refer back. We can just simply refer back to the honourable gentleman's question just now, and we can refer to the reference of the shadow ministers to the streeting trial. If that is not personalising, I don't know what is. But I tell you what. I'll take an evidence-based approach. I have done that on this issue from day one. Had the Conservatives done so, we would never have seen the Tavistock scandal. We would never have seen puberty blockers dished out willy-nilly to children and young people in this vulnerable patient group. I have sought at all times, including when I was sat on those benches, to treat this debate with the care and sensitivity and the humility it deserves, to not be tribal in my interactions. I only wish this Conservative opposition would take the same approach.
We're only at the start of this urgent question, so I ask members to reduce the temperature in the chamber. Rachel Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friend for the care and sensitivity he has taken to this subject all along. It's been an undeniably difficult year for transgender people in Britain. I've spoken to young trans people who've been pushed to the brink of suicide by what they hear, that they don't have a right to exist, that they don't deserve rights, that they're legitimate targets for ridicule. And we all in this House have a responsibility to lower the temperature and focus on their welfare, health and dignity. King's College operate the highest standards of safety. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that their expertise and rigour will support the well-being of participants and ensure we get the robust evidence we need and that vulnerable children are no longer treated as political punch bags?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. She's absolutely right. That we must engage with due care and sensitivity on this issue. I can share with the House that these exchanges, government policy, what is said by me and others, is followed extremely closely by this group of children and young people who are extremely online, by the wider LGBT+ community, and my honourable friend is right, that trans people are often at the wrong end of the statistics when it comes to being victims of hate crime and discrimination and mental ill health. We must always tread carefully when talking about suicide in this context and bear in mind the warnings of the government's advisor on suicide prevention, Professor Lewis Appleby, and the way in which that issue has been deployed irresponsibly by critics of the ban on puberty blockers that was put in place. We bear all of those things in mind. I do think we've got a high quality trial set up. I do have confidence in the clinicians. We've had a cross-party briefing from the clinical team. I'm very happy to repeat that exercise and to keep coming back to the House and to arrange briefings for MPs on a cross-party and for peers on a cross-party basis so that we can follow this closely as we should.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the care with which my right honourable friend has approached much of this, and I appreciate that he has before him some very difficult decisions, especially because of the way the report was written. But I must come back to the simple truth that these are very, very young children. Decisions will be made for them, I appreciate, by parents taking that element of consent, that are genuinely irreversible. And whatever happens, we're going to see 8, 9, 10-year-olds grow up to 18, 20, 25-year-olds, at least we hope we will, who have effectively been experimented on. Now, some of those children are going to resent very greatly, not just the system, not just their parents, but those who allowed this to happen. And here I identify the Department for Health and Social Care, not necessarily the Minister himself. What provision is he putting in place to make sure that should those children wish to bring legal action against the department, against those who took these decisions at a time when they were not able to give any form of informed consent, they will be able to have redress, they will be able to have their day in court.
Can I firstly thank the Right Honourable Member for the way in which he puts his concerns, and I know he is concerned about this trial. I know he's stated publicly his opposition to it, and I enormously respect the way in which he has done that. And these are finely balanced judgments, and I acknowledge that. The CAS review found that puberty blockers have been prescribed routinely without good evidence for their safety or effectiveness. And that's why a clinical trial was proposed. They are licensed and used safely in much younger children for precocious puberty or older adults for certain cancers. For adolescents, the interaction with all the different processes of puberty may be very significant, which is why more evidence and a better understanding of their impact is needed in this patient group. Anyone on the trial can choose to stop taking puberty-suppressing hormones and leave the trial at any time. They do not need to give a reason. If a young person decides to stop taking puberty-suppressing hormones, their care in the NHS, including the gender service, will not change in any other way, and their doctors will explain to them and their parent or guardians what treatment options are available. And I know there are concerns about the longer-term impacts on fertility. Prospective participants will be given comprehensive information on the advantages and potential risks of these hormones, including details about preserving fertility. Doctors will explain the possible long-term consequences and available options. Young people will also be offered to consult a fertility specialist, and the young person and their parent or guardians must clearly demonstrate a full understanding of all of these issues, and only then, after that, would a clinician sign off on the admission to the trial.
I ask colleagues to keep their questions short and for the Secretary of State to keep his responses on point. Select Committee Member Josh Fenton-Glynn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I hope that we can all agree that the young people involved should not be used by anyone as a political football. Can my honourable friend please assure me that this process and trial will be clinically led and not as a result defined by rhetoric in this place or anywhere else?
I can certainly give my honourable friend that assurance.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also welcome the tone and the sensitivity that the Right Honourable Gentleman has taken to this issue, not just today but throughout. We all recognise that we should be led by evidence in this. It's absolutely vital. But the trans community is, as has already been mentioned, a reality. They feel very vulnerable, very attacked, and there are those who have been on these medications for some time and are now concerned that they may no longer be available. What can he tell us to reassure them that they will be safe?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, there have been, as I reported at the time that we put in place the permanent ban, there have been arrangements for people who were previously being prescribed puberty blockers. For people who wanted to access them but couldn't once the ban came in, they have not been able to access them through authorised means. I recognised when I took that decision and through the representations that I have received both directly and in writing, that caused considerable pain and distress to a very vulnerable group of children and young people and people who care very much about them. That has not been something I'm indifferent to and something that I have taken very much into consideration. But with respect to all of those people I have met, no amount of political pressure should deter a health secretary from moving away from the clinical advice and expert opinion that really should underpin these sorts of decisions.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the trial and I commend the Secretary of State for following clinical advice and for the work of government in trying to build a consensus for the most minoritised communities in our country. Can I ask to empathy and thoughtfulness to speak directly to trans people who will be watching this debate, who may at this Christmas time be struggling with estrangement from family and from other difficulties? Can he speak to the dignity and worth to which they are entitled and send a message that this House has their back?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that question. Look, I recognised that the decision I took, literally within days of coming into this office, was received by trans people in particular and the wider LGBT plus community as a negative decision that detrimentally impacted on their rights and identity. That was why it was an uncomfortable decision for me to take. I knew how it would be received, and I had to balance up risk in that decision. I believed it was, and I still believe, by the way, it was the right thing to do for the right reasons, a clinically led decision. And when it comes to the care and health for children and young people in particular, I make no apology for exercising extreme caution. I do want trans people in our country to know that this is a government that respects them, respects their identity, wants them to live with dignity and safety and inclusion. That is the approach the government is taking. I realise that decisions I have personally taken have not been received in that way, and that has not been comfortable for me, but I do believe it's been the right thing to do.
Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If we were resting this judgment on purely clinical evidence, it would be to tell every child that whatever sex they are is immutable and cannot be changed, and that if they take these puberty blockers, they may well find they have irreversibly changed the course of their lives. How is a child of 10 or 11 going to be capable of making that judgment? And whatever the CAS review says, in the end, it is his judgment. And I remember the COVID inquiry repeatedly saying it was wrong for ministers to hide behind the science. And equally, there is no single clinical advice. Clinicians are as equally divided as the rest of society on this question. We rely on his judgment, and I'm afraid I think he's got it wrong.
Well, can I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question and the way in which he puts his criticism too. And for the avoidance of doubt, as I said earlier, I know what my responsibilities are. I understand the decisions that I take in this office, and I understand that I'm accountable for those decisions, and I don't resolve from that. I am following clinical advice. I do think that is the right thing to do in this area. On the question of sex, he is right. Sex is immutable, and even having undergone treatment with hormones or surgery, there are still, nonetheless, underlying biology means that, for example, trans women would still need to be screened and treated, bearing in mind their biological sex, and the opposite being true for trans men. And we have to draw that distinction between biological sex and gender identity. The final thing I would say is, whatever my discomfort and personal views about this particular trial might be, or the notion of young people using puberty blockers in this way, I cannot ignore, and I should convey faithfully to the House, conversations I've had with trans young people and adults who have described in very powerful and unforgettable terms not just the life-changing but life-enhancing experience they've had. I think particularly of the university student I met, who, if she walked into this chamber now, you would assume was born female, is living her best life and described in very powerful and unforgettable terms the impact that treatment has had for her and her quality of life. At the same time, I think of high-profile cases like Kira Bell's. And that is why we have to tread extremely carefully in this area, follow evidence, build an evidence base, and why these are such finely balanced judgments, and why I can be simultaneously uncomfortable with the permanent ban I put in place and uncomfortable with this clinical trial. I think that's hopefully reassuring to people that I think very deeply about these issues before taking decisions.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a deeply troubling time, as the Health Secretary has said, for the trans community. And I've heard that loudly from my trans constituents that have come to surgeries and in my postbag too. And when suicide rates amongst trans people are higher, much higher than the general population, we know where denying that they exist or denying them life-saving healthcare leads. So what reassurances can the Secretary of State give to my trans constituents and the families that support them, who are extremely worried that they won't be able to access the healthcare that they need?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question, and I think the reassurance that we can provide to trans people in our country is that we are committed to making sure they have access to the highest quality and evidence-based healthcare. And that doesn't just apply in the case of children and young people, Madam Deputy Speaker. I hope to report to the House before the Christmas recess the work that's been undertaken in the Levy Review into adult services too. So we are committed to making sure that we provide high quality care to a particular vulnerable group of children and young people.
Kirsty Blackman.
Although I disagreed with the permanent ban that was put in place, it is to the Secretary of State's credit that he has been very clear about all of the competing issues that he's balancing in order to make the decisions that he's making, and I do appreciate that. What I would like to ask is, for those young people who were hoping or are hoping to be part of the clinical trial or hoping to receive puberty blockers, for whether it will genuinely or whether they believe it will make a difference to their lives, how is he going to ensure that they are given appropriate support, the young people that do not get to become part of this trial, when they've been hoping that this will be something that will change their lives?
Grateful to the honourable member for her question and the way she puts it as a critic of some of the decisions I've taken in this space. I think the reassurance I can offer is that the way in which the whole study will work is looking at the holistic care that this particular group of children and young people receive, and making sure that on the wider therapeutic side, in terms of mental health support, that support is there, it's evidence-led. So regardless of whether a young person receives puberty blockers, they will certainly receive that wider range of support.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I really appreciate how the Secretary of State is taking a science-based approach. Yeah. I would like to understand, we use puberty blockers for many different conditions. Will there, within this trial, also be looking at the data that has been amassed from those used to puberty blockers for other conditions? Can we also just state on record puberty blockers are reversible, as shown in the evidence? When you stop taking them, they stop working. That is the science behind them. And finally, young people in my constituency are more likely to age out of gender services than they are to get their first appointment. What are we doing to shorten that waiting time? Not just for puberty blockers, but actually for all the range of services the NHS provides for trans children.
Response. If members do not keep their questions short, I will not get everybody in, and the answers need to be just as short. Thank you.
I will try, Madam Deputy Speaker. The answer to my honourable friend's question is, firstly, we will make sure that in terms of the wider support that young people receive, that they get good access, that it's evidence-led, and I've had to wrestle with the fact that some trans people enter adulthood without ever receiving any sort of healthcare, and I've been heavily criticised by those people in particular for some of the decisions that I've taken, and we're working to reduce waiting times I described. And the second thing to say, look, my honourable friend said that these are irreversible. Puberty blockers. We hear contrary views around the House of saying these are not irreversible. The truth is, the evidence in this area is mixed, and that's why I think we need to build a stronger evidence basis.
So, Julian Lewis.
The Secretary of State deserves our sympathy for having to negotiate such an ethical minefield. Can he tell us whether the data exists from all the people who had puberty blockers under the old regime. He mentioned having met one person for whom they'd worked well and one person for whom they were a disaster. Surely it should be possible to do a systematic survey of the dozens, if not hundreds, of people who went through this, and might that not be a slightly more constructive and less dangerous way forward?
The honourable members, absolutely right, that we do need that data linkage study. That will happen. It won't produce the same evidence base as the clinical trial, and that's the distinction between the two. And it's frankly a disgrace that people have sought to withhold that kind of data. It is really important we get it right. I appreciate your sympathy. I would just say I've wrestled with this issue probably more than any other ethical decision I've had to make in this office. I don't require, I don't seek any pity or sympathy for doing so. It's the job I signed up to. It is a job I love doing. I've taken great care and sensitivity in this area because of the particular vulnerability of this group of children, young people.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's fair to say that the recommendations of the CAS review were not welcomed by everyone, not least by all members of the LGBT+ community. But it was the Conservative Party who set out this review and accepted its findings. The Labour Party supported the review and supported the findings. Does the Secretary of State share my concern that there are those who now would seek to cherry-pick which of the findings they agree with and which they do not? And is it not the case that an independent review with such serious and important findings should be accepted in its entirety?
I think when it was published, there was, and I was in this chamber at the time, there was actually an overwhelming consensus in the House. There were some people who criticised and challenged the CAS review at the time, including outside of the House in the LGBT community. I've always supported the CAS review, led by one of our country's best paediatricians. And it is because of that I'm proceeding in the way that I am, which is the way that Dr. Cass, now Baroness Cass, recommended. And I'll continue to follow the evidence and implement the CAS review comprehensively and fully.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A survey published today by Transgender Trend shows overwhelming public support for non-intrusive medical approaches for under-16s with gender dysmorphia. The public want this state-sponsored child abuse stopped. So, will the Secretary of State represent the will of the people, stop the trial, and instead introduce statutory legislation to access the evidence data from the 2,000 children and young people already given puberty blockers through the Tavistock scandal?
I'll take the honourable member's question in three parts. Firstly, in terms of the opinion polling she mentions, that does show that this country is overwhelmingly a kind country that wants to make sure that trans people and LGBT people more broadly are treated with kindness, compassion and inclusion. Secondly, I do not dismiss the opinion polling that shows a majority against this kind of trial. And so thirdly, I would say the reason I am doing this is because I have to think about this extremely small group of people. I do not know what it is like to walk in their shoes. I have to think very carefully about what's in their best interests, and the best way to do that is to build the evidence base we need to provide high quality healthcare. And I strongly do not agree with her characterisation of this study, which I think is in itself irresponsible.
Lynch.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Some of the political debate around this subject has really saddened me, not least the way that trans people's reality and experience has been denied. We even have evidence of British trans people from the 4th century. We have that evidence. They've existed forever. So can the Secretary of State confirm that this trial is a real attempt to get a proper evidence base for treatment for young people that is really needed?
My honourable friend is absolutely correct. It is about building the right evidence so that we get high quality, safe healthcare for this vulnerable group of children and young people.
Afra Brandreth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Children struggling with gender dysphoria and their families are trying to find their way through very difficult and often distressing times. We should be helping them, not experimenting on them. So should we not be following the example of other European countries, such as Denmark and Finland, who have shifted their policy towards counselling rather than medical interventions?
Assure the honourable member that we are absolutely, as part of this study, as well as part of the rollout of services across the country, focusing on the therapeutic support that she describes. We are implementing the CAS review that recommended this particular trial for this particular purpose, and we will follow the evidence in that respect. Of course, we do look at what other countries are doing, why they are doing it, and what research emerges.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have immense respect for my right honourable friend, particularly his commitment to equal access to healthcare. Could he speak a little bit more about the support on mental health for children and young people involved in the trials, those who won't be able to get the trials, and also people who are currently on puberty or receiving puberty blockers, or for whom the ban is causing them immense stress or worse?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. Regardless of whether people are receiving this medication, we do need to make sure they receive the right therapeutic support to make sure they have healthy, happy childhoods, and they can understand themselves and the world they're living in and how they relate to it in a way that does not cause them distress or harm. That's my objective in this process.
Madam Deputy Speaker. For young people questioning their gender, the Pathways trial is currently the only route allowed for accessing puberty blockers, which are a treatment that can be a vital respite from the anguish of going through puberty in a body that doesn't match your gender before long-term decisions may or may not be made as an adult. I therefore welcome the announcement of the trial, whilst recognising that significant barriers to entry remain. So, my question is, how will the Minister ensure that as many young people as need to can access the trial, including those who need to access puberty blockers as part of support to improve their mental health?
Can I thank the honourable member for a question? I don't doubt her sincerity and integrity on this issue, but I say to her respectfully, when she talks about barriers to entry, those barriers are safety and clinical oversight, as well as parental consent and the assent of the young person. I don't believe those are barriers. I believe those are necessary bars for participation in this trial.
Lindsay Farnsworth.
Deputy Speaker, and may I associate myself with the comments of previous members in relation to the fact that we're talking about humans who deserve to be treated with dignity. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, as a former Crown Prosecutor, I firmly believe that evidence is hugely important, and the CAS review said that there isn't enough evidence at present that puberty blockers are safe. But does the Secretary of State agree with me that the responsible thing for this government to do is not simply to ignore the plight of such young people, but rather to conduct the clinical trial to obtain robust evidence needed to direct policy going forward?
Yeah. My honourable friend is absolutely right, and given I also work for a former Crown Prosecutor, I couldn't possibly disagree with her on evidence.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for his response to the question. One thing we should all agree on, the human rights of all, including trans people, must be protected and delivered by government and supported by us all. The reason we are here today, I believe, is to discuss the risks and the potential adverse consequences of the Pathways trial that is being proposed. The trial compares the timing of treatment initiation rather than using a placebo, and there's no arm that provides psychotherapy as a treatment option without puberty blockers, and there's no arm assessing children who do not receive any of these options. So will the Secretary of State please consider ensuring that all various arms and channels are tested as part of this trial to get a complete picture rather than a partial picture which may be misleading?
Can I just firstly thank the honourable member for the way in which he puts his question, And I think it's so important to emphasise that right across this House, there are many people who oppose this trial who do want to see trans people well supported and protected and respect their identities. And I think that's important for everyone to bear in mind. He talks about placebo. I mean, for obvious reasons in this case, a placebo wouldn't be appropriate because it'd be very obvious whether or not a young person was receiving the real medication or the placebo. But the trial design has included a control group, and the way in which the trial is established is to help us distinguish between the benefits of receiving or indeed not this particular medication, as well as really close oversight of the impact on development. But he is right that we need to judge these things and look at it through the question of risk. And I think that is what led to Dr. Cass to make her recommendation and why I'm supporting it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the Secretary of State's answers today and his ongoing support for the Cass review. From his previous answers, it's clear that the Secretary of State has seen public opinion, and I wonder if he might be prepared to call an independent clinical review, given that high degree of public concern about the trial.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very happy to receive further clinical representations on this issue and to hear from experts on this issue. I hope you understand why, on this particular issue, I'm not simply led by opinion polling. Local advice and evidence, particularly given the enormous risks that surround these children and young people, including the risks that I carried and weighed on my shoulders and conscience when I denied access to puberty blockers by upholding the temporary ban and then making it permanent.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is now on child abuse to give children puberty blockers. This trial will take confused little minds, vulnerable children, and place them on a medical pathway with profound life-altering consequences. Childhood is a time of uncertainty, yet the state is intervening with drugs that many former patients now say they were never even capable of consenting to. How can this government justify experimenting on children rather than prioritising safeguarding, evidence and psychological support?
I just say to the honourable member, she's offered a political opinion, not a clinical judgment. And by that logic, we wouldn't have any medicine for children and young people, because we will have never undertaken clinical trials or studies, because we judge that children and young people can't take part in them. And that is objectively not a sensible position. I understand the sensitivity surrounding this particular issue, and she is right to say that there are people in our country who have received life-changing clinical interventions that they have later regretted, and as part of that regret have shared that they did not feel that at the time they were making and could have made an informed decision. And that is why this trial is set up in such a way that it has such strong clinical oversight locally as well as nationally. It cannot happen without not just the assent of a young person, but the consent of their parent or guardian. Those are important protections and safeguards, and I do not share her characterisation of this trial.
Speaker, I support the Pathways clinical trial, but it's clear that many young people presenting with gender incongruence won't be able to access the trial for whatever reason. I'm very concerned about the mental health of those who won't be able to access the clinical trial. What additional support can the Secretary of State provide for those people, particularly around their mental health? Because that is my concern.
The study obviously includes a lot of research around wider therapeutic support and interventions, including mental health support, and we're rolling out more clinics and services across the country to bring that care closer to home.
Short question, Jim Shannon.
First of all, can I thank the Secretary for all that he does? He deserves credit. A mother from my constituency phoned me this morning. I'm going to quote her. Why is money being spent on this pathway when my child has been waiting for clinical support for 3 years and the waiting list is so long she may be moved to adult treatment? Why is government prioritising the tiny few over the money? With our children's mental health services at breaking point and parents at their wits' end trying to get their child diagnosed, how does government look in the eyes of the parents with rare diseases whose drugs are not funded by the NHS when government are funding this trial? Thank you.
I would say respectfully to the honourable gentleman, who I like very much, and his constituent, it is because I've also had to look into the eyes of people in this community who have not received the right care and seen the deleterious impact it's had on their mental health and well-being. I've had to deal with parents who've suffered loss and bereavement, and we have to make sure that we are doing the right thing by everyone, and this should not be an either-or choice.
Samantha Liblet, short question.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Trans people don't wake up at 18 suddenly trans, it starts before then. And when we talk about protecting children, this means protecting trans children so they can transition into adulthood knowing they had parents and doctors that were advocating for their needs. But this is not a prison sentence either, so I wonder if the Secretary of State can talk about the trial and if people change their mind, whether they are entitled to withdraw from said trial.
They certainly can, Madam Deputy Speaker, and if they withdraw, they still get the wider therapeutic support that they deserve.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're talking here about physically healthy primary school-aged children being injected with drugs to stop them growing up. There is nothing medically wrong with these children. What these children need is love, support and compassion to help them accept their healthy bodies. They are perfect just the way they are. The Health Secretary says he's uncomfortable with this experiment, and his instincts are correct. In the haunting words of Keira Bell, a courageous young woman, a victim of the Tavistock scandal, I was an unhappy girl who needed help. Instead, I was treated like an experiment. And when these children, who are now going to be experimented on, become adults, they will want to know who did this to me. But this time, the truth will be this was state-sanctioned. Out in the open, I'm afraid to say, at the Health Secretary's say-so. So I am begging the Health Secretary, will he use his power as the politician in charge to do what he must know is right and stop this?
State.
Can I say to my honourable friend, I wish I had certainty on this issue, and in some ways I envy him for his certainty. And can also say to my honourable friend, having occasionally found myself a lonely voice when sat on those benches in my party, I respect the fact that it is not easy to be in a minority dissenting voice, especially when one feels so strongly about it. So I respect his position, even though I disagree with it. I do think this is the right thing to do. He is right that we need love and compassion and empathy for these young people. We also need to understand what health and care support will produce the best outcomes for these young people, and that's what this trial is about.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do thank the Secretary of State for his leadership on this issue. I think nobody envies him in the decisions he has to make, but he is making the right decision on this issue. During my election campaign, I met a fantastic mother, and I think no mother could have loved their daughter more. And she told me about how when her daughter entered puberty, she had to come to terms with her own biological sex and the impact that had on her mental health. So to delay puberty, she stopped eating. She ended up in hospital, arrived in hospital in an ambulance so weak that she had to be treated in the ambulance. So I welcome that this trial will look at some of the side effects of puberty blockers, but alongside that we'll also consider the impact of not taking puberty blockers in some cases. And can you also update us on how we will be kept up to date on this trial as it progresses?
I can certainly promise my honourable friend we will keep the House regularly updated. I must also say to him, It is those risks that he's described that have weighed heavily on my conscience when putting in place a permanent ban on puberty blockers. And I've understood the risk involved and the vulnerability of this particular group of children and young people. I also meant to say, in response to my honourable friend who asked the question previously, I would say that the parents of trans young people love their children very much, and that has been at the heart of so many of the representations that I've received from parents as well as young people.
Final question, Josh Newbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. At its publication, the party opposite welcomed the Cass Review, including the clear recommendation for this trial. 8 years ago, the then leader of the Conservative Party supported self-ID and declared trans women are women. Now we have dog whistle statements like, if we leave these children alone, many will get over it, which the Shadow Minister said just yesterday in Westminster Hall. Would the Secretary of State agree with me that a rigorous clinical trial is the only way that we will get the impartial evidence that he needs to make informed decisions on gender-affirming care for trans young people?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend that we need a strong evidence base, that we need to conduct these conversations with great care, consideration and compassion, that we need to recognise the vulnerability of this particular group of children and young people and the fear that so many trans people in our country feel about whether this is a country that accepts and respects them. The political climate has changed since we made all the progress we've made on LGBT equality over the last 20 and 30 years. But do I think the character of this country has changed? Do I think we are less inclusive, less respectful, less loving or less caring? Absolutely not. Those are the hallmarks of this country and the British people. We might be having a debate about the efficacy of this trial, but I think the overwhelming majority of people in this House do so in that spirit of wanting trans people to live healthy, happy lives where they feel safe, included and respected in our country.
That is the end of the urgent question. I'll give the front benches a few moments to shuffle over as we prepare for the first statement. Statement on UK-EU Common Understanding negotiations, and I call the Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And with permission, I'd like to make a statement on the Government's strategic partnership with the EU. The Government was elected with a manifesto commitment to reset relations with our European partners, to tear down unnecessary barriers to trade and to cut costs and red tape for British producers and retailers, to increase national security through strong borders and greater cooperation with our closest allies, and indeed to support jobs here in the UK and opportunities abroad. And in May this year, this Government agreed a new strategic partnership with the EU that the Prime Minister announced at the historic UK-EU summit, the first of its kind. It's a landmark deal that is good for bills, good for our borders and good for jobs. And we took this decision, exercising our sovereignty, to strike a deal in the national interest. We had to fix a bad deal passed on to us by the previous government, the first trade deal in history that made it harder to trade. And just as we have done with the US and India, this Labour government is striking deals to bring down bills for British people and open new opportunities for British businesses. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, since the summit, I've led negotiations with the European Commission to implement the commitments we made. So I'm therefore pleased to inform the House that earlier today, the UK and the European Commission concluded negotiations for the UK's association to Erasmus Plus from 2027. And it will open up world-class opportunities for students, teachers, youth workers, sports sector professionals and communities of all ages in our education, training, sport and youth sectors, both for the professionals that work in those sectors and crucially for our young people too. And for students, this means more chances to study, to train, to work, to volunteer abroad, gaining language skills and experience that makes them attractive to employers. For our teachers, youth workers and those who work in the sports sector, it means greater opportunities for professional development. And for our schools, colleges, universities and providers, it means access to networks and partnerships that will drive quality, encourage research links and enhance the reputation of the UK's world-leading education system. And indeed, I was meeting with students at the New City College in Hackney this morning, Madam Deputy Speaker, to see the range of benefits they're going to be, including also playing basketball. Now, as part of Erasmus+, participants can travel to any European Union member state and indeed several countries outside the European Union as well. It will go further than schemes that have come before it, offering a broader scope of activity and a specific focus on unlocking opportunities for all. This is an investment in opportunity for young people from all backgrounds, our workforce and our future, and it will open doors for tens of thousands more young people across the UK, renewing our ties with Europe and beyond. This Labour government has always been clear that we want young people, no matter what their background or where they live in this country, to have access to the best opportunities in life. It's what we consistently delivered and is what we are delivering with this announcement today. And we're pleased that the EU has agreed financial terms that represent a fair balance between the UK's contribution and the benefits this programme offers. The 30% discount in 2027 compared to the default terms in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement is what has paved the way for UK participation in the programme. And we have also agreed, Madam Deputy Speaker, there will be a review of the UK's participation in the programme 10 months after our association, so we can look at the actual data concerning the demand for funding in the UK. And going forward, any continued participation in Erasmus Plus under the next multi-annual financial framework will be informed by that data and our experience of association in 2027. We've always said, Madam Deputy Speaker, we won't sign deals unless they're in the national interest, and in this case, I'm happy to say the agreement passed that test. The government will now work to maximise take-up across all sectors so the benefits of Erasmus Plus association can be fully realised. We'll work closely with institutions and our young people to support this, particularly amongst disadvantaged groups. And a UK national agency will be appointed to administer the programme in due course. In addition, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to inform the House that the UK and the European Commission have also concluded exploratory talks on the UK's participation in the EU's internal electricity market. And the details of this will be set out in an exchange of letters that will be published next week between Commissioner Maros Sefcovic and myself. Closer cooperation on electricity will bring real benefits to businesses and consumers across Europe. It will drive down energy costs and protect consumers against volatile fossil fuel markets. It will drive up investment in the North Sea and strengthen energy security. The UK and the EU will now proceed swiftly with negotiations on a UK-EU electricity agreement. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is not all. I welcome the clarification from the European Commission today that in practice there should be no carbon border adjustment mechanism costs levied on UK electricity exports, a welcome development that reflects our extensive use of renewables. Negotiations to link our carbon markets are also underway. This will cut costs, it will make it cheaper for UK companies to move to greener energy, and once agreed, it will save UK goods exports from EU CBAM charges on £7 billion worth of UK exports. Negotiations on the food and drink agreement are also underway, which will enable food and agricultural businesses to trade more cheaply and easily by slashing red tape and costly paperwork introduced by the last government, whether it's the £200 businesses currently face for export health certificates on every single shipment, or small businesses choosing not to trade with the EU altogether. And the new agreement that we have will put this right, boosting our exports, cutting costs for importers and bringing down prices on supermarket shelves. The UK and the EU are committed to implementing the commitments of the May 2025 summit in a timely manner. We are working swiftly to conclude negotiations on that food and drink deal and linking our carbon markets, I can tell the House, by the time of the next UK-EU summit in 2026. So across all these areas, The UK is clear, of course. There will be no return to the single market, customs union or freedom of movement. We will agree deals that are in our national interest. This government is exercising our sovereignty to deliver for the British people. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are committed to building this new strategic partnership with the European Union. Indeed, I spoke with my counterpart in the Commission, Maros Sefcovic, last week, where we underlined our shared commitment to implementing the common understanding the Prime Minister and the Commission President agreed at the UK-EU summit in May. Whether it is through boosting opportunities for young people and educators across the country, or cutting energy bills, or a food and drink deal that slashes red tape and cuts costs, I will always negotiate in the interests of this country and our people. Yeah. And I will continue, Madam Deputy Speaker, to lead negotiations with the Commission. I look forward to the next annual UK-EU summit where this government will continue to build that new strategic partnership. It is what a grown-up, pragmatic relationship looks like. We work together under shared aims for mutually beneficial solutions to our shared problems. That is the approach this government is taking. That is the approach that is delivering results, and I commend this statement to the House.
Call the Shadow Minister, Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We on this side of the House recognise the importance of giving young people educational opportunities, but it is vital that the government benches clearly don't recognise the need for schemes to offer genuine value for money. Now, the UK already had the opportunity to remain a member of Erasmus, but it was precisely because the last government recognised that that scheme did not offer value for money to the taxpayer that we chose not to. And that is why the previous government created the Turing scheme instead. A global programme for young people in the UK that did not require a one-sided blank cheque to be handed over to Brussels. Yep. Now, the Turing scheme delivered 43,000 placements around the world last year, 23,000 of them to learners from disadvantaged backgrounds at a cost of just over £100 million. So can the Minister confirm that this statement does not in any way undermine the future of the Turing scheme, that that scheme is guaranteed, or are those opportunities being sacrificed for the smaller number of opportunities available under Erasmus+? Now, the Minister has confirmed that the UK is to pay £570 million as the cost of rejoining Erasmus+. We understand that is being paid for from existing budgets. So can the Minister tell us where is that money coming from? Or is this £570 million being added to the £6 billion send black hole that the OBR identified in the education budget? And does the Minister expect more than the 10,000 students a year from the UK who previously took part in Erasmus Plus to take part in the new scheme, or are we paying £570 million for essentially 10,000 placements a year? Now, the Minister spoke about a fair contribution being a 30% discount. Of course, it's only a matter of weeks since the government was briefing that a fair contribution would be a 50% discount. So it's clearly failed in those negotiations. But can the Minister assure us that whilst he says he's got this discount in the first year, that a discount will be available in subsequent years? And if that hasn't yet, those assurances haven't yet been received, is he prepared to walk away if the EU does not offer us a similar deal in future years? So the opposition has set out clear tests to ensure the government does not roll back on Brexit, including no backsliding on free movement. So can the Minister outline what protections will be put in place to ensure that rejoining Erasmus does not simply mean a return to free movement by the back door for young people? This is particularly important given his complete failure, when asked multiple times, to set out what size of cap he thinks would be appropriate for youth mobility. Now, rejoining Erasmus is just the latest attempt by the government to undo Brexit by stealth. And this fact became, Madam Deputy Speaker, this fact became clear from the very outset of these negotiations, when the government agreed to surrender UK fishing rights for 12 years to the EU, under the pretence that this would, and I quote, pave the way for the UK defence industry to participate in the EU's proposed new defence fund. Yes, 6 months later, this deal has collapsed after the EU's extortionate demands for billions of pounds to join the fund, with no guarantee of any return on the investment in the form of procurement. So can the Minister explain to our hard-working fishing industry why they won't be getting their fish back even after this deal has fallen through? Madam Deputy Speaker, the British people made clear their decision to take back control in 2016, but despite the government's protestations, their approach shows an increasing disregard for this democratic decision.
Thomas Simmons.
If I get this right, I chose not to sign up to participation in safety. It didn't represent value for money, and they're criticising me for that. They're now criticising me for signing up to something that is value for money. So let me just tell him about fish. I'll tell you what's a big advantage to our fishing sector that exports 70% of their catch to the EU. The food and drink agreement that I am going to secure by the time of the next UK-EU summit. That is what will benefit our fishers. And as for his point about the Turing scheme, I should just say from the dispatch box, first of all, that any person in this academic year currently on the Turing scheme will continue to be funded. I think it's important that I say that. But I have to tell him, I mean, the honourable gentleman's numbers are absolutely all over the place. And the Erasmus Plus, first of all, the Erasmus Plus scheme has changed significantly since the version that his government walked away from. But not only that, come off it. Do you think seriously that that lot could have secured a 30% discount at all? Absolutely not. So, the last year of the Turing scheme, the one figure the honourable gentleman did get right was that it was 43,200 people. Erasmus is a